The Kenmore City Council is now in, the Kenmore City Council is now in session. First, I'd like to read the land acknowledgement and also acknowledge that today is Indigenous Peoples' Day. We acknowledge that the city of Kenmore is situated upon the ancestral lands of the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Sewaltal, Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Tulalip, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and other tribes who are part of the Coast Salish people. We recognize and express our deepest respect for their enduring stewardship and profound relationship with this land, which they have cherished and protected since time immemorial. We honor the First Peoples, acknowledge their vibrant cultures, and commit ourselves to learning from their wisdom in our journey to promote justice, equity, and mutual understanding. We pledge to stand alongside these communities in acknowledging past injustices and working towards a future that respects and celebrates the diverse heritage of this land. And next we have a proclamation. And it's one of particular meaning and significance to me, and I think probably many people in this room. Domestic violence is incredibly underreported and probably touches each and every one of us in some way, shape, or form. Here at City, before I read the proclamation, I also want to share that we have purple lights on the trees out in front of City Hall and are giving away purple light bulbs at the front desk for our community members who would like to wish to have purple lights in honor of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Okay. So I will begin. Whereas domestic violence is widespread and has a devastating impact on survivors, children, families, and our community, and whereas domestic violence crosses all economic, racial, gender, educational, religious, and societal barriers and is sustained by indifference, and whereas approximately 1 in 8 Washington adults reported experiencing domestic violence in their lifetime. And whereas intimate partner violence remains one of the most prevalent yet underreported crimes in the country. And whereas ending the cycle of this vicious crime requires the courage of survivors and the support of the larger community. And whereas our efforts must extend beyond the criminal justice system to include housing and economic advocacy for survivors, working with young people to prevent violence, and reaching out to friends and loved ones who have suffered from domestic violence. And whereas Kenmore City Council and the city should honor survivors by promoting peace in our own families, homes, and communities, we all renew our commitment to end domestic violence and its brutal and destructive effects so that domestic violence has no future in Kenmore or beyond. Now, therefore, I, Melanie O'Kane, Deputy Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim October 2023 to be Domestic Violence Awareness Month throughout the City of Kenmore. And before I introduce our guest speakers and further comments, I want to share that I was at my doctor's office recently, and my doctor said how grossly underreported domestic violence is, and said it's at least 1 in 2 intimate partner relationships. 1 in 2 people experience domestic violence in their lifetime, according to my doctor, which I tend to believe based on my experience speaking with friends and family members throughout my lifetime. So We have two organizations who are accepting this proclamation. First, we have a statement from LifeWire to be read by our city clerk. Anastasia?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. LifeWire writes, Dear City of Kenmore, LifeWire extends its deepest gratitude and support for the proclamation of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We are sincerely appreciative of your commitment to raise awareness and uplift our mission in supporting survivors of domestic violence on their journey to safety, stability, and healing. Domestic violence is a pervasive, life-threatening crime that affects countless individuals and families within our community, regardless of age, economic status, race, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, or educational background. Thank you for joining LifeWire in our efforts to eradicate domestic violence, empower survivors, raise awareness, and work towards the overall well-being of our community. By shining a bright light on domestic violence, the City of Kenmore is letting every survivor of abuse know that help and support is available. LifeWire is committed to providing vital, survivor-driven, trauma-informed services such as emergency shelter, transitional housing, advocacy, support groups, mental health services, and economic empowerment. Once again, on behalf of LifeWire and all of the survivors whose lives will be positively impacted by your proclamation, thank you. Your commitment is truly commendable, and we look forward to our continued partnership in making a lasting impact. Sincerely, Janera Benscombe-Gill, Co-Executive Director of Organizational Operations of LifeWire.
And we also have Heidi Hyatt from Christian Coalition for Safe Families. Would you like to say a few words?
Yep. Just make sure I speak into this well. Before I put on my Christian Coalition hat, I want to thank you for the Indigenous Peoples Proclamation. My ancestral tribe were the victims of a terrible genocide in California in 1860, which very few of them survived. So I sincerely appreciate the Indigenous acknowledgements, and it's very meaningful on a personal level. Thank you. As far as my Christian Coalition hat, it's good to be back. Several of you have been allies of ours for a very long time. We used to come to the meeting here and accept the proclamation, and I'm deeply, sincerely grateful to be here tonight doing this again. My comments are brief. I wanted to point out that this summer, the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, WASPC, issued a summary of crime statistics in Washington State for 2022. It was very sobering. We've all heard that domestic violence rates went up during the lockdown years. Unfortunately, the WASPC report speaks to an increase in crime, a drop in the officers available to respond to that crime, and a record homicide rate. It notes a dramatic increase in homicides in Washington State since 2019. WASPC's report also notes that 45.9% of all crimes against persons were domestic violence related. So that's not 10%, that's not 20%, that's nearly half of crimes against persons in our state are committed by people in their own household. So that speaks to what you said about 1 and 2. It's probably a much bigger problem than we realize. So we ask you to think about that, because if nearly half of all crimes against persons are committed by someone in their own household, that is why we all need to keep doing what we're doing. We work to end this scourge by constantly creating awareness of domestic violence and associated issues, highlighting news stories, featuring problems and solutions, and offering resources. Ultimately, it's clear that there's much work to be done to cultivate healthier households in this state. So we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for continuing to stand with us in the fight for peace and justice. Thank you.
I want to thank you for your incredible work. It's important work for our community. Would you like to join council for a photo?
Sure, thank you. I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Carlinzi, where's the fun?
Well, let's go back to last month when Maura Query produced the Children's Business Fair. And there she is. She just walked in the room. Yeah, we have co-creators and then we have what I call super co-creators. And Maura is a super co-creator. And so on her own time, volunteering, she put together this amazing children's business fair. It was held last year in the hangar only with 16 vendors, but opened it up to the hangar and the town square, had 50 vendors this year. And the vendors, the children that produced goods and services, they ranged from ages 4 to age 17. And products varied, included 3 published authors, jewelers, painters, horticulturists, and more. So it was a really fun event. I got to go there and part with my money a little bit, and it was a lot of fun. And if you go to the last slide, so this is, so here's a picture of some of the, just a small sampling of some of the goods that kids had made. But if you go to the last slide here on the left, at the very end of the event, all the kids got together and Maura gave them a congratulations and a pep talk, and can you tell their sisters? Look at on the right, that's Maura with her sister who helped her out with the event. And there were a lot of volunteers. It truly took a village to put this on. But I also want to point out, this is what you call a true love note, where very little staff time was needed or involved. Maura did not stress us out and come to us with numerous requests. She was independent and on her own and figured things out. All we did was provide the venue, and we promoted on our regular media channels like we do with all love notes. And she and her volunteers took care of the rest. That is a love note. So Maura, thank you so much. Do you want to say anything? All right, so Maura, this isn't the only thing she does. She organizes other things like litter pickup parties and other things like that throughout the community. So she is indeed a super co-creator, and she just also so happens to be a Kenmore City employee, but she does all of her co-creator work on her own time. So it's just wonderful, and we're so lucky to have her. So thank you, Maura.
I want to, on behalf of the council, we want to thank you too. The work that you're doing for our community on your own time is incredibly valuable and true leadership. Thank you.
Can we give her a little round of applause?
Okay, next on the agenda, we have public comments. We welcome our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. We will hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you're online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address comments to the mayor and city council. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. Please state your name and city of residence for the record and keep your comments to the allotted time. We will not split your time with others or reset your time except by express approval by the presiding officer. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the council or clerk in advance. Please do not comment about pending development projects on which council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial matters, and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for taking time to express your comments.
Deputy Mayor, at this point, I see Pat O'Brien signed up to speak on site. Mr. O'Brien?
Good evening, Council. Pat O'Brien, Kenmore. As I just want to know how many of you read the new code changes 40 pages of lined out and new code. How many of you read that? You all should read it before you pass it. Because what it does is it gives new and extraordinary powers to code enforcement who has a history of abuse, myself included. I've had Brian Hampson lie under oath regarding my solar panels and the disposition of my property. George on Arrowhead, he had a case where the city lost over $150,000. The people on the Hill had too many cars and they won. They won a moral victory because they were going to take that to the state court. That cost the city $150,000. So you have a history of having abusive code enforcement people here, and somebody hired one of them back. And that is a black hat gun and a mark against the city of Kenmore, because you can't have bad actors and expect people to trust the city. The city was founded on the premise that no new taxes, same level of service. And there's all kinds of squirrely baloney trying to get out of the city's obligations. Oh yeah, you got money for watering baskets and putting trees in, they're going to die if you don't have more labor do it, attend to them. That's, I wish I had 10 minutes to talk to you folks. So we've got problems at Lake Point. And basically Lake Point is just an ongoing struggle on how it's going to be used in the future. And none of the 13 wells that are under court order has dictated be tested, has been tested. So there can be no remedial action plan. There is capping, and that isn't even on the list of acceptable ways to remediate that site. So, you know, I basically look at the instruction you folks are getting from the League of Cities, and I find it analogous to Scientology, because you have a single place you go to, you fly, you get your airfare, rooms, food, all that. And if somebody's not here and was a former treasurer, flew every month on our dime, and we want you to break the $500,000, $750,000, $250,000 legacy of League of Cities. It's an illegal thing that you're doing with our money. And it basically, excuse me, I'm being muted. Am I talking too loud? I reclaim my time. We're being forced to pay for these trips, and it's total baloney. So we need a testing plan. We need a blue ribbon committee to figure out what we're going to do at Lake Point. And well, there's more. You should all be reading the new powers given
Thank
to
you,
city
Mr.
staff.
O'Brien.
And I hope you don't adopt any of this until the public gets a better look at it.
Your Honor, can I say something, please?
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate Mr. O'Brien. He and I have interacted a lot over the years, and he's always had a lot to say. But I do need to take exception when somebody besmirches my coworkers in public. And
That's in the rules.
Your Honor, can I speak?
You're not allowed to comment on my comment. That's in the rules. You just read it. I heard her say it.
I find Brian Hampson to be an honest person. I know that he has not lied. And I'm here to defend my coworkers who are honest and respected individuals. So, Your Honor, that's all I have to say. I'm here to defend my coworkers who do not
Please.
lie, and they do their job in. Your Honor, can I?
Please save this for staff comments.
All right.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane, may we move on to online comments now?
Yes, please.
We do have a handful of comments ready. We'd like to take them in this order. Richard Lewis, followed by Stacy Valenzuela, Rabbi Chaim Rivkin, Nancy at Glenwood Gardens, and Jim. Richard Lewis, can you hear us? Richard Lewis, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Hello. Okay. Well, on a lighter note, happy Columbus Day. Did you know that the purpose of celebrating Columbus Day was to encourage Americans to be more accepting of immigrants, Italian immigrants in particular? The Italian explorer Christopher Columbus was meant to be the symbol of the holiday, not the focus of it. Italian Americans had suffered appalling violence in New Orleans, tarnishing political ties between Italy and the United States. But in response to that, President Benjamin Harrison in 1892 commemorated the explorers' accomplishments and pledged to protect foreign nationals from mob violence. Italian Americans now had a way to be included in the American story without persecution and to raise the status of a badly oppressed Italian American community. In the year 1937, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt proclaimed Columbus Day an official US holiday, and for good reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Stacy Valenzuela, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Can, go ahead.
Thank you. Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. I concur with Patrick and Richard. You brought tears to my eyes. Today, I choose to celebrate my heritage of Native American, finally on the forefront, as well as Italian American. My cultural heritage that many Italian American families grew up with suddenly being denied because of the deeds of one man saddens me. We all should be celebrated and proud of our heritage. We should denounce the bad actor element, not the whole group. Also, residents have been bringing forward concerns for over 18 years of the asphalt emissions causing health issues with some of our neighbors in several neighborhoods. I am in contact with neighbors, Heidelberg Cadman, and Clean Air Agency. Sadly, this is the first summer in years that neighbors were able to breathe cleaner air and enjoy their patios. The asphalt company feel they passed the emission testing on August 15th and 16th by tweaking something so they can operate as usual. Does the city repaving have something to do with this? If the testing determines that they have not passed, they could be found in violation and fined. I think we residents see a little twinking that needs to be done, as it's not just steam. Let's talk Lake Point, industrial site Kenmore. It was so wonderful to hear at the town hall that again, the majority of Kenmore residents came forward to say, we would like to see the property owner let remediation happen, then retain 45 acres as a Kenmore municipal public park and only develop 5 acres or so. Please, let's make this happen. We need our manufactured home communities protected. Hundreds will be added to the homelessness in our city if action fails to protect against emotional eviction and death due to stress of not being housed. On our waterways and walkways, please inform our residents, where is the plan to recover the over $500,000 default of loan to the Kenmore Road Club? City Hall, we know, have not taken care of all the trees. Still, they're being clear cut from lots. Protections do little to nothing to restrict significant or other trees being cut, or where are we replacing them? By those who destroy them most, the developers in the city themselves. The trees in our yards and throughout our community greatly improve the air quality we breathe. These trees absorb heat, greenhouse gases, as well as pollutants such as ozone, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. Where do we hear that those are coming from? Oh, the asphalt. They protect our wetlands, ecosystems, salmon-bearing creeks, and streams. The very promises that you make to climate change are being denied. If actions are not taken now to preserve and protect what's left of our natural habitat, we may not have any clean air, waterways, tree canopies, or ecosystems left. Thank you.
Rabbi Rivkin, Rabbi Kim Rivkin.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. We can hear you. Go ahead.
So I'm not sure if that's the right time to speak. I'm here to speak about the bill that you guys are trying to discuss about the unattended displays.
Rabbi, we do have a public hearing on this matter. It's further down in the agenda. So you might have to wait if you wish to speak then. You will have 5 minutes. You're also welcome to speak now.
No, not a problem. So I'm going to wait. When are we expecting approximately to talk about it?
Between 5 and 10 minutes.
Not a problem.
Moving on, Nancy at Glenwood Gardens. Nancy, can you hear us?
Oh, I can hear you now. This is to the council. And it has to do with questions and suggestions on a SEPA process for a reasonable use exemption that was granted by Kenmore for a property nearly all defined as critical areas in Kenmore codes. So it's a significant issue. And I'm not mentioning the name because I don't know if it's appropriate or not. So it'll be a little hard to follow. People who commented in June 2021 heard that an appeal had been filed and the hearing would be October 10th. We received a letter October 10th this year, so it's taken that long for the city to work this out. We received a letter from Kenmore Friday stating that a hearing was canceled and the appeal was canceled, and a process called stipulation and order was set up between the two parties, the city and the property owner. So once decided, a signature from the judge is final on this. The project has had a lot of changes since the original comment period, and the only way for people to comment on new developments would be an appeal. So now it appears the public will be shut out of the SEPA process completely. I'd like to know how and why the public can try their best to protect areas that make common sense to preserve national environmental issues as best we can. I would like to know how we can do that, then be left out of the process after making the effort to comment. Is it allowed by SEPA to have decisions without public comment, with a judge deciding without knowing all the relevant information? I need these answers. I don't know. I know I have a challenge for the choice of, I have a challenge, and I would like to be able to present this. And was a no wetland determination being done on a particular section of the property. The reasons would be it has significant wetland vegetation now that we know. It sits on a lower part of the property on a spot below a spot already designated as wetlands. And one issue I was advised to mention, it's difficult to get accurate hydrology information in dry months, the time this study was done. So the ordinary procedure is to check hydrology during the wet season, and this wasn't done. And if a site is flooded or inundated with water for 2 weeks, it is likely to have hydric soils. I feel all of these are very relevant, and a judge should be made aware of these issues before he's required to make a decision. And so, like I said, I didn't mention the address, but I'd like to have answers from any city employee who can answer these questions. I really would like to know. Thank you.
Thank you. And before you leave us, can you state your full name and your city of residence for the record?
Nancy Hanson, Kenmore, Washington. Do you want my address?
No, please no.
Okay.
Thank you, Nancy. Jim, I see you have your hands raised. Jim?
Hi, it's actually that's my husband's name, Elizabeth Mooney. Can you hear me or see me?
We can, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Anastasia. My name's Elizabeth Mooney. I've lived in Kenmore for 29 or 30 years now, and I'm here to ask about 3 subjects. But first, I want to thank the City Council and City for the Respect of Indigenous Peoples Day and the month of domestic violence and the purple lights. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Melanie O'Kane. One, a couple weeks ago, our city manager mentioned that he would look into one of my concerns, which had to do with the asphalt plant, Heidelberg materials starting up again. My understanding was that Puget Sound Clean Air Agency had not condoned that their emissions had passed, but that they had thought that they had passed. So I look forward to hearing an update about that, because I think many citizens in our city are concerned about that and whether it's a health issue. Secondly, along those same lines at our shoreline is, what is the status of the dredging permit that we have concerns about, that I heard about from Ms. Hayes, Mr. O'Brien, by Cal Portland, about the birthing channel, and how Cal Portland, which is right across from Lake Point, wants to dredge and seems to be minimizing, in my opinion, the significance of that because of the potential for there being contaminants of concern there. So I would like to bring that to the city's and community's attention, and would appreciate having an update about the testing request in that berthing channel where the barges dock. Thirdly, I do care deeply about our environment and the trees that are needed around here, and have talked over the last month with Jim Howard, and I respect his comments and want to support his comments that will have come up about exceptional trees in general that are significant trees. And my family and I have been talking about how, in order to get some consensus, maybe we could form a joint committee responsible for helping evaluate requests to remove exceptional trees, because otherwise we might be just giving away more of our needed tree canopy to developers that don't care as much about preserving the resources that we can't get back by planting small trees. So I know that, our citizens sometimes sound upset, but I think I want to help us achieve consensus among our citizens, our lawmakers, and our staff. So thank you all, and have a good day, and let's get public health and safety and our environmental justice.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney. Carl Michaelman, did you have your hand raised? Mr. Michaelman, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go on.
Okay, Carl Michaelman. I am a business owner that owns property in Kenmore. As well, according to Karina File, I'm a non-resident in Briar. So essentially, I just kind of want to touch base, as we know elections are happening here. And essentially, I just kind of scratching my head with the council when you were bringing stuff when it comes to tenant rights and taking care of people with affordable housing. And I scratch my head because if we put everybody together, tenants, business people, landlords, and other sorts of people, and have a conversation before we put this tenant rights in, what's been happening is the city council has taken economic development and put it on the bottom of the list. And the problem is, if we really kind of look at what's going on, Main Street Properties had a purchase and sales agreement where they were going ahead and going to buy Jay's Cafe and put, I think it was 100 units. And what happened was the council, were told if the tenant's rights go in, he's going to pull out of it. And no one's talked about the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands that you folks have lost the city between revenue from taxes, between people moving into the city, spending money at the Stoop and 192, asking for insurance with Michaelman Insurance Group. And last but not least, what the real insult is, when we told you folks that when you're dealing with this tenant rights, we would be sued. And now add insult to injury, we, the city, are getting sued by a tenants, by a residential association, and us, the taxpayer, is paying to defend it. So it's like a double whammy. And last but not least, I listened to the shoreline get together you guys had today, and it pretty amazes me with Karina File as well as our mayor saying that we have to find and subsidize or partnerships in businesses, which you don't do, to help affordable housing. And then what you're doing is raising taxes, putting a garbage tax, increasing PSE tax, doubling the car tabs for people that you say you're trying to help. It's smoke and mirrors, council. If you're really going to go ahead and have a partnership with businesses, you got to bring economic development back up at least to the top 5. And quite frankly, the way that you're doing accounting, you're hurting the people you're telling us you're trying to help.
Thank you, Mr. Michaelman.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane, I see no further hands raised.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have the consent agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Seconded, Councilmember File.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The consent agenda stands adopted. Next, we have two public hearings. The first one is for.
It's a point of
Let me-
order.
Yeah,
We called the meeting to order, but we haven't had a roll call, and we have missing council members.
clerk, would you please take the roll?
It is a special meeting and I will take the roll. Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Kugler,
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Here.
Councilmember File,
Present.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Here.
Now,
Thank-
Councilmember Baker has been excused and Mayor Herbig is currently excused but might join us later.
Thank you, clerk. Okay. Next, we have two public hearings. The first one is for proposed ordinance number 23-053, exceptional trees, presented by Development Services Director Samantha Loyick for public hearing.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Kenmore City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present ordinance 23-593 to establish an exceptional tree program in Kenmore. The information provided tonight, including the ordinance, has been reviewed by City Council for some time now. Some of the dates provided here from September 2021 to as recently as September of this year illustrate the number of times and the dedication that council has provided for this important ordinance and subject. In addition to the 5 dates provided here, council also discussed tree protection regulations on April 9th, 2021, May 26th, 2021, December 6th, 2021, and March 21st, 2022. So that's my calculations 9 different times. What we've done as part of those 9 different discussions through City Council is talking about breaking these regulations up into a tier 1 and tier 2. And so this page summarizes the tier 1 regulations that went into effect in 2022. And these were some of the items that we thought could make an impact pretty quickly. So changing the definition of a significant tree. So before this ordinance, before 2022, this March, the definition for a significant tree was 8 and 12 inches, depending on evergreen or deciduous. And this changed it to 6 inches. We also revised the tree retention requirements to not give credit for certain nuisance species like alders and cottonwoods. So that'd be, for example, in the development, if they wanted to count those for credit, they don't get credit for that. And then we codified the tree removal application process and updated the penalty language as some code cleanup items. And we have the permits valid for a shorter period of time. Instead of 2 years, it's now 1, and that helps get trees into the ground faster. That's the recap of tier 1. Tier 2 regulations have also been discussed at length by council. This is a list of those. However, this evening the ordinance before you is only to number 6 on this list to establish an exceptional tree ordinance. And the remaining 5 items will be brought to council hopefully in the coming months. As part of this, the tree regulations update that council has been reviewing, there's been public notice and transparency has been emphasized. And so this is where we're notifying the public. Tonight's public hearing is the 2nd public hearing, whereas only 1's required, but to increase just transparency with the public and tell people what's going on, we've provided a second public hearing. It's also been in the quarterly newsletter. We talked about it at the town hall meeting. It's been in our e-news. And there's been a listserv email that went out also. So as part of this update, there may be questions about, well, what about housing? So trees and housing can coexist in a sustainable and harmonious way if they're managed properly. By applying these strategies that are listed here, which is part of the housing strategy plan for the city of Kenmore, trees and housing can coexist in a mutually beneficial way, creating livable and resilient environments for both people and nature. So in 2017, the housing strategy plan was approved, and since then, the city has been working on some of these implementation strategies. So density transfers, manufactured housing community overlay, ADU regulations, expanding density bonuses, and a multifamily tax exemption. And we've also adopted school impact fees with exceptions for low-income housing projects. We expedite permit reviews for affordable housing projects. And we've authorized spending for an affordable housing project on city land. These are all relatively recent. And then we adopted comprehensive plan amendments for missing middle housing near transit corridors. And we've also continued to fund the Arch Housing Trust Fund for affordable housing projects. The city council has prioritized both the need for housing and tree preservation, which is consistent with its top two priorities adopted for the 2023-2024 Kenmore City for the priorities for 2023-2024. To further support housing, the ordinance allows certain modifications to zoning standards. These are included in the ordinance and include for single-family residential subdivisions and short subdivisions on sites in the R4 zone that contain exceptional trees, the minimum lot size may be reduced to 5,400 square feet. And then also setbacks may be reduced in order to maximize the protection of an exceptional tree. So getting into the exceptional tree program is currently we have significant trees defined, and the exceptional tree program goes one step beyond that by protecting large trees. So an exceptional tree is an important community resource, which because of its unique combination of size, species, and age is worthy of long-term retention and may not be removed or damaged. That's essentially what this ordinance is, and it will apply to existing properties and to development sites. So adoption of the program is consistent with Kenmore City's #1 priority right now, which is to implement the adopted climate action plan and promote environmental stewardship, including air, water, forest, and habitat restoration and preservation. So tree regulations provide substantial value to the city and its residents. Some of these values are listed here, as you can see, and include reducing soil erosion and water pollution, improving air quality, reducing noise pollution, providing habitat for animals, positively affecting energy and water conservation measures, and reducing the amount of stormwater runoff and stabilizing soil. For example, did you know that a 30-inch DBH, so diameter at breast height, Douglas fir tree will intercept more than 3,500 gallons of rainfall each year? That's a great example of offsetting the amount of stormwater runoff that would otherwise go into our system. Climate scientists maintain that large exceptional trees add value beyond measurement. So invaluable, right? And that those native to the Pacific Northwest, like Douglas firs, Western hemlocks, and Western red cedars are some of the best in the world at carbon sequestration. Preservation of existing exceptional trees will help achieve the goals of the city's climate action plan. It will also expand the tree canopy and carbon sequestration opportunities noted in the cap. This slide provides an outline of what trees are considered exceptional and at what size. And the size column, you'll see that it says DBH, or diameter at breast height, which is measured 4.5 feet above grade. The exceptional trees listed here are native to the Pacific Northwest lowlands. And if the tree is not specifically named in the table, it's protected as a catch-all if it's 48 inches DBH or greater, with the exception of some nuisance species like alder, black cottonwood, English holly, and Leland cypress. And the sizes of these vary. So there's not one other than the 48-inch kind of catch-all. They vary because different trees and species, they grow at different rates and they have different characteristics. So like madronas are relatively slow growing, whereas big leaf maples grow really quickly. So that's why there are some of the sizes differ in that table. So this is exceptions to the exceptional tree ordinance. So in limited circumstances, there can be exceptions made, and those are highlighted on this slide. Hazard trees, so if you have a tree that is unhealthy or structurally unsafe, and we would require an arborist report, and then the staff would review it, including me, who's a certified arborist. And in instances where access to a project, there's the only one way to access a project, then exceptions may be granted, including for public facilities and utilities. And certain variances and reasonable uses may be granted, but will be a type 2 land use decision. So this includes a public notice, 21-day public comment period, a decision made by the city that's appealable to the hearing examiner. So we've not had this process in the past where it's been a full land use application for tree removal. The fines have also been updated. And so that this is just to reflect on the left side, significant trees. Those are the existing fines and penalties, and the exceptional trees are just greater than that. And they're not to exceed 150,000 for each violation. And that's just to reflect that these exceptional trees or heritage trees have so much value to the community. With that, the recommendation of Kenmore City staff is to establish the exceptional tree program and approve the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. Do we have any questions? Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you. So the purpose of added flexibility for a lot setback or a minimum lot size is to preserve an existing tree. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And could you give me two very simple examples for me as to how that might work? Would one with the setback might be, we're going to preserve the tree near the front of the property, but the project needs more space, so it would maybe go back into the back setback?
That's a good example. Yes, for setbacks. And then the alternative would be for the lot size in the R4 zone, the minimum lot size is 7,200 square feet, whereas in the R6 it's 5,400. And so what it's doing is it's taking those R4 properties and allowing them to go down to the 5,400 square foot lot size in order to preserve exceptional trees.
And I apologize, how does it do that with a smaller lot size? I can't picture it.
So as a developer is designing a project, if there's an exceptional tree and if you were going to put it in a tract or a preservation area, it might make your lot smaller. And so you would be able to maybe like shift lots around or, have different orientations.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Sorry, a couple of quick things. Remind me, because I think it's on a different piece of our rules on the permit costs. So if a tree is a hazard tree and a homeowner needs to take it down, we want them to get a permit, but remind me, is there a cost to that if it's a hazard tree?
Yeah, the permit cost, regardless of whether or not it's a hazard, is around $210.
Okay, might want to reconsider that at some point, not tonight. And my second question is, did staff consider having I guess it's the overall question around the penalties. It seems quite different than other cities. And maybe just from reading the 2021 report again, it seems like most of them have a flat penalty. And there was some discussion of potentially having a different standard for developers versus homeowners. So I was curious both how we came up with the penalty level and whether we staff considered differentiating the standard.
Oh, that's a good question. I know that we took the feedback from the different council meetings and in our notes and collected those and provided the fee information and then ran it past our city attorney. So we kept it consistent with the fees, how they are right now, but just an increased fee for exceptional trees. And there may be more to that along in like the fine print of the ordinance. I'd have to look.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. Really appreciate this work. Thinking about how lots can be reconfigured to protect and preserve an extraordinary tree, an exceptional tree. Working together with developers while also meeting the greater demand of being environmentally sound. I'm wondering about developer credits. We're going to probably hear questions about that. What kind of, are we as a municipality able to work together with developers to give them some developer credits to work with land, protecting, preserving, and working around trees that are exceptional in nature, to have some adaptability in their own design?
What type of credits are you asking about?
Well, if you're looking at, for example, affordable housing, or we've always had, or we do have a pathway to ensuring a greater pathway to building, for example. But also I'm thinking about how we work together with the development of lots. Sometimes they're wanting credits to kind of offset the cost of developing around while working with innovation of building. I'm wondering about how we meet those two pieces together.
So this program does not provide that type of credit or any type of financial offset. Instead, what it does is when you get credit for an exceptional tree that meets your tree density, essentially it would most likely, because they're huge, meet your tree density requirement for the development proposal. And also there are some exceptions or allowed deviations that Councilmember Marshall mentioned about the lot size and the setbacks. And that does help to offset some of the restrictions, right, with developing the lot.
Right. So I guess this question is more for our city managers into the office. Do we have flexibility with developers on building in heights or when working around significant extraordinary trees?
I guess perhaps through a development agreement. That's the only thing I can think of.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
You guys have more questions before we open up public comment or the public hearing? All right. One, I want to thank the deputy mayor for stepping in for this meeting. Two, I did have one question, because I was listening as I came in. When you're talking about hazard trees and needing an arborist report, and I heard Councilmember Shrubnik, I think, also asked kind of around the fees issue, but do we have an idea what it costs in the general market for somebody to get an arborist report on a large tree ballpark? Okay, I was just curious. Deputy Mayor.
I actually have some questions around the arborist report as well. I just want to make sure that people getting the arborist report and permission is accessible to ensure that there is a process that if I understand correctly, I'm just going to say this out loud. I would rather people be able to get it without a fee because it's so important. I don't want people bypassing a process that's this important because the fee is too expensive.
Councilmember Kukla.
I have a couple of questions. One is, do you know if we've ever done any education to the public about the tree canopy, how we measure it, and the fact that private property is a big portion of that?
So in not the most recent, but the previous tree canopy assessment, we provided that report to Kenmore City Council as an education piece. And then later in November, we are having King Conservation District come back again to provide an updated tree canopy assessment. We also provided information as part of a tree giveaway event, like I think a couple years ago. And we had printed material. We showed people how to plant trees. We talked to them about the canopy assessment and also gave away trees.
Okay. I wonder if we can work with any other organizations. Like, I think that example you just gave is great, but like collaborating on education specifically about like energy savings, cooling, stuff like that. But one of the reasons why I think a lot of people end up removing really large trees is because they just want to let light in, like sunshine, and don't want as much shade. Like I just saw some really big trees cut recently because of that. And I've been thinking about whether there is a way for us to incentivize keeping trees or instead of like removing them. And I just remembered having done this myself at one point where I did have an arborist come to give me a price quote about like, I don't remember what the term is called, but getting rid of branches throughout the tree, right? Instead of like removing it, and the cost was kind of expensive, like more expensive than it would have been to like just remove the tree or and not really not really beneficial to hire the company to just come and do that type of work. And so I think if we really want to encourage people to keep the trees, I don't think we can just look at like educating them about what the benefits are for them and the city. Like I think we need to look for other incentives, and maybe, I don't know if we can work with like companies or encourage them to find alternatives of getting rid of the tree instead of like other ways to like add more light, sunshine to the areas that they're concerned about.
Any other questions, comments? All right, I'm going to open up the public hearing. For the public hearing, people will be granted 5 minutes to speak. Same rules as public comment apply, including say your name and city of residence, addressing your comments to the council and not splitting your time with others. If your comments have been fully expressed by preceding speakers, we encourage you to summarize your statements by stating your name, city of residence, and saying I agree with the previous speaker. We will hear testimony from our on-site guests first, followed by virtual guests. Thank you for taking the time to participate in these public hearings. Declare the public hearing open. Clerk, do we have anybody signed up?
Thank you, Mayor Herbig. We have Pat O'Brien wishing to speak on site.
Patrick O'Brien, Kenmore, Washington. 5 minutes is a luxury. I agree with what Deborah said, and I agree with what Angela said. One thing you're not taking into consideration is already existing law on removing trees when they interfere with solar projects. And if you look into Washington code, you'll see that you're not allowed to obstruct a neighboring photovoltaic display. So look into that before you send in the code enforcement people, because that would conflict with Washington state law. The other thing that I've dealt with in the past is where one of our very tall 150-foot Douglas fir trees fell on a neighbor's patio and home. And once they issued a nuisance letter to us, then that impacted our homeowners insurance and would raise the rates, or the policy could be canceled. So if a neighbor says your Douglas fir or cedar has fallen, or we're afraid that it's going to fall on our home or property, and they issue you a warning, it is mandatory that you take action and resolve that issue with the tree. So think about that and people's insurance, which was not discussed. I did hear where sewer, gas, and electric lines that are impacted by trees, the tree could be taken out. That's interesting. I would say whatever you do as far as tree preservation, incentivizing the builder or property owner is probably a much better idea than penalizing them. If you said, hey, you have 0 lot line, great. How would you like more height? How would you like one less parking permit requirement? Something to make them go, it makes financial sense for us to keep this tree. And rather than, oh, we're going to come in and we're going to find you, because maybe in a lot of cases, like behind me, they took out all the trees and they were more than willing to pay any fine, but they would have changed their minds had they had an additional ability to build closer to the road setback, or maybe some other sort of thing. The real property aspect of who the tree belongs to is also a question. And I know you want to keep the trees. I do too. I've planted over 30 red cedar in my yards, and I have probably one of the biggest red cedars, which I hope will always be maintained there. But I've had neighbors offer to pay me large amount of monies to take that down to increase their view, and I've rejected it. But you might think about the pressure on people who live in a view corridor and are being told or asked to remove their tree. So that I'm giving you some conflicting statements here. So I know the trees on my property clean the air, filter the water, but we're still dealing with the asphalt issue. We're not sure that any secondary tests were done, that they have a valid operating permit, and they play the shell game on who owns the asphalt plant. Oh, it's this company. Oh, it's this company, this company. And they've been cited for doing illegal things at the plant, upgrading it, operating it.
Mr. O'Brien, I'm going to ask that you keep your comments
Yeah,
to the
yes,
public
no,
hearing.
no, asphalt was one of the things mentioned. I'm on point. I'm on point. Asphalt and the trees and their ability to filtrate the CO2 and toxins is part of this discussion. So please let me finish. Thank you. Then there's a general problem with the way the city installs trees along walkways and in roadways. They block the type of trees you choose, dump a lot of leaves on the road, makes it very slippery for bicycles, especially this time of the year, creates all sorts of road blockages where you can't see around the trees. and low shrubs would be much more appropriate for many of our walkways. And I would suggest that evergreens would be better, a better solution than any tree that drops leaves and we have to hire the vacuum.
Thank you, Mr.
No, I still
O'Brien.
have time. I was interrupted. I've got about 20 more seconds to go.
Mr. O'Brien, thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yes, I
Madam Clerk,
reclaim
do
my
we have anybody
time.
online?
I reclaim my
Yes.
time.
Yes, we do have online guests, no more.
I
on-site
reclaim my
guests.
20 seconds. I was interrupted by you, Mayor.
Yes, you are off topic, Mr. O'Brien.
Yes, can
We're
I have my
moving-
20 seconds, please?
No, we're moving on to people who are off-site. Thank you for your public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. At this point, we're moving on to virtual public comments. We'd like to hear from these guests.
Okay, one last comment.
Mr.
This
O'Brien,
meeting is
You have had your
illegal.
opportunity.
You didn't have a quorum and you didn't notify the public before not opening up
Mr.
the
O'Brien,
meeting on
I need
time.
you to step away
That's-
from the
Is
podium.
that,
or
isn't that
you'll be
right?
removed
Is
from
that not correct? You did not, you posted something on the window and didn't notify the public in the proper amount of
O'Brien,
time.
this-
So this is no quorum. Thank you.
Mayor Herbeck, we'll move on to online comments. Stacy Valenzuela, followed by Leo Frank, Matthew North, and Andy O'Brien. Ms. Valenzuela, can you hear us? Stacy Valenzuela, can you hear us?
Now I can. Can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Thank you. Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. Just like residents receiving information about who to call for electricity, water hookup, garbage, information about required permits for tree removal and protection of our stormwater drains is needed. Therefore, I agree with part of the education from Angela and some of the other statements. We see our trees again being clear cut from lots. Look at 192nd, 68th Avenue. The residents even heard the arborist brag about taking down the significant tree. What is happening on 80th Avenue tree cutting? Unless the city is strong standing, there will be clear cutting more to come. Our ordinance and protections need to restrict significant and other trees being cut, require replacing them by those who destroy the most. The developers should pay a lot more than residents. Denying variances unless another option, redesigning the development to work around the trees. We also need permit signs properly and timely posted so that we can make public comment. Incentives to protect our trees. We do need to require larger replacement trees and a designated spot and advise the public of where is this area? The trees in our yards and throughout our community greatly improve air quality we breathe. These trees also absorb the pollutants such as ozone, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. They protect our wetlands, ecosystems, salmon and fish-bearing creeks and streams. The very promises that you have made for climate change are being denied as we keep seeing the clear cutting and significant trees removed. Yes, our city council has brought forward the tree ordinance, and we appreciate that. Thank you so much, but we need the staff, including the permit department, to enforce the protections. If actions are not taken now to preserve and protect what's left of our natural habitat, our tree canopy, we may not have any clean air, waterways, or ecosystems left. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stacy. Leo Frank, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. First off, I work with youth right now. I'm a camp counselor during the summers, and during the rest of the year, I semi-coach, assistant coach football. And one thing that I like to instill in all of our youth is a sense of patriotism and a love for America. And I feel that's something that is kind of lacking in modern society today. And one of the things due to recent events that was brought up to me today, because even though it's Columbus Day, we still hold football practice. We can't stop football. It's the fall season. Is us remembering the USS Liberty. So on June 8th,
Mr.
1960.
Frank, I'm sorry, we need your comments to be on topic. This is a public hearing for the exceptional tree ordinance.
Oh, my apologies. I thought it was on the other topic. For the exceptional tree ordinance, I do have an actual comment on that. We need more ropes to hang all of these kikes and niggers. There's not enough trees to hang up all of these.
Clerk, please cut off his audio.
Matthew North, can you hear us?
Jews did 9/11. Why do Jews suck baby penis? Why do they
Please
worship
remove this
Satan?
man from the meeting.
I have a First Amendment right to free speech. Thank you very much. I would like my full.
Okay, where were we? Matthew North? Matthew North, can you hear us? Matthew North, can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello? We can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. I would like to start off by saying it clearly sounds like the Goyim know. And to any of my Polish friends out there, Gazować Żydów, the trees, the exceptional trees, the Doug firs. I'm a carpenter, so I just really like cedar is so good. Hickory, we don't have a lot of that around here though, but I would like to say that the trees are, I get tired of
State
hearing
your
about
city
this
of residence for
green,
the record,
green this
please.
and that, and how I can't have a propane grill, but yet we got to cut down all these trees when, in all actuality, where else are we going to store all the niggers and kikes?
Mayor, I removed that man from the meeting, if that's okay with you.
Yes, he wasn't speaking to the agenda item.
Okay. Moving on to Andy O'Brien. Andy O'Brien, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, go ahead.
These, for just a split moment, I want to say these horrible callers calling in. No place in America for this. My father, he died in the Holocaust. They made soap out of him. The Holocaust was a big anti-white lie, and the
Mr.
Jews,
O'Brien, you
they
need to direct
deserve
your
it.
comments towards the exceptional tree
Oh,
ordinance.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say.
Also, we need your city of residence for the record, please.
My what?
City of residence for the record.
Oh, the Jews get what they deserve in Israel.
Okay, that Mayor Herbig, I do have additional hands raised. Would you like us to continue or would you like us to take a short break?
Let's take 2 minutes.
Thank you.
We're going to resume the public hearing. I would remind participants to start off with their name and city of residence and to keep their comments to the topic of proposed ordinance number 23-0593, exceptional trees. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Nancy at Glenwood Gardens, can you hear us? Nancy Hanson?
Yes, I just have a couple of comments. I just read the ordinance recently and I hadn't really been involved, but it's really well done. And thank you, everybody who worked on it, especially Samantha. That was just incredible. Let's see, the only thing I do keep thinking about is how it's going to be enforced. So I did like the idea that Elizabeth Mooney suggested on having a group of citizens maybe to help support the city in doing all the tasks that are needed, that are required. Along with it must be a lot of individual things to have to do. And then I have one issue that's a neighbor issue. It's a shared tree, actually. It has grown onto my lot. And it keeps, the wind makes it go right onto, anything grows from that tree onto my roof. And I spend like 6 or 7 months of the year with my garbage bin, my yard waste bin filled with debris from this tree, literally. And I don't mind all of that, but I'm afraid of my roof. And I've had let's see, first it was a 3-inch, then a 4-inch caliper. Last year I had a 5-inch caliper limb from it that was 20 feet long, and it landed in the middle of my lot. So I'm just waiting for one on the roof, and I've already replaced a roof. I've only been in Kenmore for about 7 or 8 years. So I don't know what to do, actually. I have no idea what to do. And an arborist would need to be able to enter this property and go up and look to see what to cut. And the neighbors did hire someone, but it wasn't a certified arborist. So they really didn't know what to look for in trees or limbs that might come down. These limbs are quite dry. When they do get down, I've sawed them up immediately and they're really dry. So, an arborist would be able to catch these ahead. But I don't know what to do to deal with the neighbor issue as well, and relating to this tree. And the shared tree issue is a whole different bag. So anyway, I just wanted to warn you about shared trees and explain my situation. And I really like the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Before we go to the next person, I would just, because of the length of this meeting, and we have another public hearing after this, we are going to limit, we're not going to be taking additional hands raised after the next 3 hands go up. At that point, we will limit it to the people whose hands are currently raised to participate in this public hearing. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. We'd like to hear from Elizabeth Mooney, followed by Jim Adkisson. Elizabeth Mooney?
Hello, can you hear me? Oh,
Elizabeth,
hello?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, hi, this is Jim Myers. Elizabeth, we're sharing the same cell phone, so.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
So don't worry, I'm not gonna say anything bad here. Yeah, I think we're all a little bit rattled from the last couple of comments ago. But I just wanted, I like know this is a step in the right direction to protect these trees, because effectively, when you look at the development of our city, once we lose a 100-year-old tree or a 60-year-old tree, we're probably never going to get one back again, and we're just going to continuously, I think this is an effort, and it slows the loss of our tree canopy, but I think we have to be realistic that we're not preserving our tree canopy, that everything here is loss and replacement with smaller, younger trees. And I've seen the projections for the development, and of course Kenmore is going to grow, and of course we're going to put in more housing units, but I guess at some point we're going to have to decide what we want that future to look like. And
And to the extent that, you know, we can hold back the you know, the like tide, because the trees really benefit everyone. And I think thinking about them like a land use, like a wetland, like a significant area, because their biological benefits are great. I mean, stormwater alone, I mean, when it rains, if you have a forest canopy, half the rain never makes it to the ground. And you can think about what that does to your stormwater system. These are, you know, these are benefits that we all get from trees. And of course, if we lose them, we all suffer. And I think we have to keep that in the mind. And I don't know the best way to do it. It's nice to have, you know, a chance to appeal it, but having been through many SEPA hearings, you know, for a neighbor or something to basically look at spending thousands of dollars to try and keep, you know, trees in the neighborhood, that's a big ask. And of course, it's a big ask for you know, developers too, to give up something. But I guess at some point I want to be sure that it's not the developers who are calling balls and strikes about which trees stay and which trees go, and that there's, you know, more public input on trying to keep our natural system as healthy as possible. And because it's our future. And I know with the climate change work that the city's done, it's looking forward, and the forward is bleak if we don't do something. And slowing the loss might not be enough. We have to hold the line at some point. And it's up to you, our council, to be in charge of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Adkisson.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So I was watching online. I was listening to this podcast
Could
called
you give us your
TV.
name and your city of residence for the record, please?
Oh, Jim Atkinson,
City of
88
residence.
State Street. So I was saying, I was watching on Goyim TV on Hans Matru's podcast, and he was talking about this thing called mitzvah b'peh, and I thought it was a joke, but I looked it up, and I guess rabbis suck on baby
Mr. Addison, you need to keep this to the topic in front of us, which is exceptional trees. That is your first and only warning. Mr. Atkinson? Okay, I believe Mr. Atkinson dropped off. Can we go to the next person?
Yes, we will hear from these final four people: Kai Crater, Paul Miller, Sadie Enward, and Raul Martinez. Kai Crater, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me? Hello?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, about the trees. I'm over on 88th Avenue, by the way. The exceptional tree plan that you guys have, I mean, I don't agree with removing older trees to plant new trees. I think we should keep the old trees because, you know, just imagine what these trees have seen in their lifetime and how many niggers hanged on.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, but that is your first and only warning. Appears we've lost him. Could we go to the next commenter?
Paul Miller. Paul Miller, go ahead. Paul Miller, can you hear us? Okay, we will move on. Sadie Enward. Sadie Enward.
That is not a real person's name, Madam Clerk. City Attorney.
Is there any answer?
Sadie,
I think we go to the last one.
okay. Ruel Martinez. Ruel? Or Raul?
Yes, I'm here.
Go
You can
ahead.
hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think we can afford to lose any more trees
Can you give your
because
city of
pretty
residence for the
soon the
record, please?
beaners are going to be outnumbering the trees here. And the beaners are going to replace us, and they're not going to take care
Okay,
of the trees. They don't know what the
you're
fuck
off topic for the second time there. We are going to close this public hearing. Move on to proposed ordinance 23-0584, amending the Kenmore Municipal Code sections 1842 030 and 1842-135 related unattended temporary signs and displays on city-owned property within public, semi-public zone, presented by Development Services Director Samantha Loyuk and Planner Riley Rosebotham. Rosebotham, I apologize.
So this evening, I have Riley Rosbotham with us, our planner from Development Services, and he's going to present the ordinance this evening.
Thank you for having me, and we're gonna have to take it a little bit slow, just because whoever's been calling in. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, just gonna have to take a second to collect myself.
It's okay.
So the city regulates the time, place, and manner for the posting of temporary and permanent signs, including temporary signs and unattended displays on city-owned property. The city's existing sign code authorizes temporary unattended signs and displays on city-owned property in the public and semi-public zone with a special event permit, temporary use permit, or other permission from the city. So in the past few years, there have been a few unattended displays that have been allowed through a special event permit that have caused safety hazard. So there have been like broken glass and obstructions in pedestrian areas. And the city doesn't have really a way to monitor these. So this code amendment would prohibit unattended displays on city-owned property in the public and semi-public zone, except for displays by the city for city business purposes. Yeah, so that is the basis of it, and that's pretty much the code amendment.
Do you have any questions, comments? Councilmember Shervnick?
Just one question, and actually, I appreciate this. And it's on a part that isn't changed. So I don't know if you can address it, but there's a exemption, and there's a list of exemptions, and one of them is for religious symbols. And I was just curious why that's treated as an exemption. Is that maybe something that we have to do, or, yeah, okay.
The attorney can answer that.
So it's my understanding that that section's from much older code, just hasn't been updated yet. As you'll note from the section, we put at the very beginning, except as otherwise provided, which then goes to, temporary signs, unattended displays. That question would go to a larger cleanup of your sign code for another day. This is really focused on the unattended displays and signs on public zone. Is that correct?
In the public and semi-public.
Thank you.
Okay, and then just one follow-up. We did have a question that came to, I think, several of us around their signs on public property. They're not city hall, but like campaign signs and team join signs and things like that, the little yard sign kinds. That's part of it, again, a different discussion, but there are some regulations around how long those can stay up, correct?
Yes, correct.
Any other questions? All right, for the public hearing, people will be granted 5 minutes to speak. The same public comment rules apply. State your name and city of residence, addressing your comments to the council. Don't split your time with others. Keep your comments to the unattended sign ordinance that we're discussing right now. I am going to have a zero tolerance policy for going off topic on this. And we'll ask the clerk to remove you from the meeting the second people exit the topic. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody in person who has signed up?
Thank you, Mayor Herbig. At this point, we have Patrick O'Brien wishing to speak on site and 2 people wishing to speak online. Will you officially open the public hearing?
Public hearing is open. Thank you.
Patrick O'Brien, Kenmore, Washington. So the question is on signage, and my question would be back to you on what is a sign? Is artwork ever considered a sign? Was the heron on the asphalt plant for many years unattended, there for everybody to see on 522? Was that a sign or was that art? I don't know. That's a question that you'll have to answer. Are any of the projects that the city has done, is that a sign? Is that a political sign? And I would contend that yes, some of the art projects the city is engaged in are political signs. So you need to look at that as well. And I agree with Deborah Shrebnick on if a person has a political sign, a little league sign, something like that, they should have the right to do that. And we've seen many churches in town that have put up signs that have nothing to do with their congregation, but other things, their political views, or they're sponsoring tent cities or what have you. And you need to think about those instances when you're considering what's a sign. So I would have enjoyed some pictures of the items this young man was talking about on what are past violations. How did glass get into it? He lost me at glass. I went, I've never seen any signs with glass in it. I would sure love to see a picture of that violation on the screen. So a little bit more interplay with the audience when you're trying to describe a situation. And I know Nigel's not very happy right now, so I won't say anything else. Thank you.
Mayor Herbig, may we move on to online comments? We have 2 people wishing to speak. We have Rabbi Chaim Rivkin, followed by Stacy Valenzuela. Rabbi Rivkin, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, good evening. My name is Rabbi Chaim Rivkin. I'm the rabbi of the Chabad of Kirkland.
Your city of residence?
I live in Kirkland, but I'm the rabbi of the Kirkland and the Northeast Side area, including Kenmore, Bothell, Woodinville, and that area as well. First of all, on a personal note, I was shocked to hear the words that came out of previous attendance of this meeting against the Jewish people, against what's happening right now in the state of Israel. And I feel like
I appreciate your comments, Rabbi, but we need to keep comments to the
No, I know,
ordinance.
just 5 more seconds. I feel like now more than ever, it's a time maybe the city of Kenmore should, I'm still shocked. I'm like shaking from the words that I heard. Maybe the city of Kenmore should consider to come up with an official statement supporting Israel.
I appreciate your comments, but they are not germane to the ordinance in front of us, and I apologize, but we need to move on.
End of the topic. Now, in the last year, in the last few years, We have put all around town in many, many cities the menorah around the holiday season, which was a part of the holiday display area. Last year, we were able to put one right next to the city of Kenmore. The menorah was classified by the Supreme Court of the United States as a symbol of freedom, as opposed to a symbol of religion. And therefore, the US Supreme Court forced cities, counties, and states to display the menorah on city and public properties. And therefore, I would like to consider, I know that to ban or to do anything, it's very easy. I feel like, as a rabbi, I have many people that I could use many private properties, to display anything I want almost in this town. But I feel like it's super important to have it on public property. It's very important for a lot of people, Jews and non-Jews, that last year reached out and were amazed to see the inclusion of the Jewish community in the holiday display area on public property. And I feel like it is important, especially now, to have the menorah being displayed this year as well. And also, I feel like there's a big difference. If the city could come up with better codes and better restrictions to help us to put the menorah in a safer position. Trees could also fall on public property and create harm to the public. The menorah last year fell. It was very windy one of the nights. And I feel like putting it on a private property would probably be like less safe than to be under the city codes and to be under the supervision of the city. So I want to utilize this stage. Thank you so much for listening. And I would like, if the city can approve, the menorah once again to be included in the holiday display area for the residents of Kenmore, the community of Kenmore. And we know that darkness is being defeated not through brooms and sticks, but through light. So our only job now is to spread light. I'm asking for the menorah to be displayed once again.
Thank you for your comments.
Stacy Valenzuela, can you hear us?
Yes,
Stacy,
can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Thank you. Stacy Valenzuela Kenmore. And I appreciate that there's not so many people taking chances away from others to speak with ridiculousness. This ordinance states City Hall unattended temporary displays are hazardous. I agree to some degree. I am concerned at this time with the current unattended sign as well. City Hall needs to remain safe, uncluttered, aesthetically appealing for businesses and welcoming to all residents. The ordinance would prohibit unattended temporary sign from all but who? Is there only some groups included? Why are some the exception? I am concerned now, here we go with exclusivity again. So the Hispanic displays are not welcome. Lighting of the tree is not welcome. If we are to be inclusive, the action needs to start with our city leaders. The city staff need to walk the talk, or it's a failure. There is no inclusion, only exclusion in the DEI presentation by this ordinance, unattended temporary signage, unless it appeals to all and accepts all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That concludes the people who raised their hand and signed up to speak on time. Would you like to take additional comments?
No, let's close the public hearing unless there's any objections from the council. The public hearing is closed. Moving on to the business agenda. Ordinance number 23-0593, exceptional trees, presented by Development Services Director Smith-Loyer. Anything new?
The only thing I wanted to add was in response to a public comment and Councilmember Srebnick's comment also about the difference in fees for developers and property owners. So the the ordinance does not distinguish property owners and developers, but it does say that if the violation is found to have been willful or malicious, that the amount of the penalty may be doubled as punitive damages. So that does include, which are typically instances of the city saying, don't remove the tree, and then a developer removes the tree. That's where it's most common.
Yeah, I understand. I guess my question stemmed more in the amount of the penalty being differentiated between, I just feel like it's kind of qualitatively different to levy a fine against a single family homeowner that doesn't necessarily have deep pockets versus a developer that's developing multiple properties. It feels quite different. And what would be a disincentive to one would be quite different than what would be a disincentive to a developer. So it seems like that's recognized in at least some other cities based on that 2021 report. So I'm just struggling with that piece of it a little bit, I guess. And I usually don't bring something up unless I have a solution. And I'm sorry, my brain isn't super clear today, but I guess I would suggest maybe what I saw is that, again, that 2021 report that you did, that maybe we think about a flat fee at two different levels, one for a developer and one for a single buyer. I mean, that's an option. For example, we could consider that.
Councilor File.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also agree with Councilmember Shrubnik on this issue. We do have differing code language in fines and fees and other areas of our code. If we address this issue, I think it would be more equitable, looking at the comparables and looking across the region. I also believe we need or may need to create a piece of language addressing hazards related to large old growth trees. And it seems like we have plenty of laws in place and plenty of ordinances to work with surrounding those issues, but I don't know that they're necessarily connected on this issue. Am I wrong in reading that, or can you correct me on that?
Yeah, so the Kenmore Municipal Code does define a hazard tree.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Deputy Mayor.
As a person who's particularly passionate about this issue and listening to comments and conversation here, I'm going to bring up something that I think is important, or two things. I know that this was brought back out of urgency a lot because of the exceptional tree that was cut down on 68th and 192nd recently. And I'm incredibly thankful that our city staff has brought this back to us so quickly. I'll also share that my hope and intention for the tree ordinance to come back to council was actually to go over not just the exceptional tree section, but all of tier 2 to immediately strengthen our tree ordinances and be done with the work there sooner than later. And I did hear earlier you mentioned likely in the next couple of months the full tree ordinance is coming, tier 2. I want our city to have the best possible tree ordinance. I'm concerned that we may have some loose ends here, and that by looking at the entire ordinance altogether, we might have a better outcome. I'm not sure if other council members are feeling the same, I'm incredibly passionate about this. I could vote on this now. And I brought this up though, because I'm concerned we might be moving a little too fast here and can improve some of the questions that we have about permitting and some of the other issues that were raised by council members and public comment. So I just wanted to call attention to what went through my mind as we were talking about this. I would love to pass something now. At the same time, I want us to make sure that as we're passing something as important as this ordinance, that we're in sync and don't want to have any modifications or changes. And I'm not sure if we have those right now. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall?
I see it at least as a good start and something we can improve upon if we have further ideas. And I wanted to say to Councilmember Srebnick, and I think it was Councilmember File, I deeply respect the idea of seeing if there's something to do about differentiation between developers and single homeowners. But I respectfully, really respectfully disagree, because in my case, the urgency of the purpose just sways me. I see, how can we save those trees? We don't want to have an impact in a case of a small homeowner, but I see the urgency of the purpose as overwhelming it, or as making the case for me. Yeah, if anything, my desire would be to see smaller trees protected, as to go off Councilmember Deputy Mayor Kane's thought. But I'm satisfied, at least right now, with the ordinance in this phase as a good start. I think there would be more work, perhaps we could revisit it. And besides, we also have all the tier two. The tier two that we still is going to look at has a lot of issues to it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I have actually some of the same concerns that Councilmember Marshall has. We've seen cases in other cities where private landowners have made some pretty egregious, have gone out of their way to break their tree codes in order to, make their view better or whatever selfish reason they may have. And at some level, you do need to make these things detrimental to them in order to deter the behavior. I also question, and this is a question for the city attorney, but I do question if there's a legal basis to differentiate between a developer and an individual in this situation. And I'm not asking for an opinion right now, but I'm just, it's just a question that if we were to consider that, I would want to be on solid legal grounds between the two of them. Councilmember File?
And thank you. And just one last thing here. I think our entire community was shook when that great sequoia came down just right across the street from where I live. It alone was an amazing loss, let alone the other grand trees there. And that lot had grandfathered clause issues related to the lot sale and the trees being exempt from, our adopted tree ordinance. So should we adopt this exceptional tree ordinance today? Will there be a grandfather law in place if we don't address it?
So Dawn, correct me if I'm wrong. If projects have a land use approval, then they would be vested to that. So I think that's what you're getting to is, or if they have an issued permit, like the example you're talking about had an issued permit, so they would be vested to that engineering permit. But in other instances, there may be land use approvals, and that would vest the project to those tree regulations at that time.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
I just want to thank Councilmember Commons, Councilmember Marshall, Mayor Herbig, and Councilmember File for their statements after my question. I just wanted to make sure I had a good sense of the room, that we were in the right space. This is something I truly believe in, but I also wanted to make sure that we were in sync and not moving too fast. I feel very good about this, and I'm thankful we have more coming forward on the tree ordinance. So I just wanted to give a little explanation of why I asked that question, because I care that we make the best decision here. And I do agree with Councilmember Marshall, when he said we need to start saving trees today. You know, we don't have room to lose any more significant, exceptional trees. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Kugler.
I think for the most part, like I appreciate Deputy Mayor O'Kane bringing up that idea that we might consider it along with everything else under tier 2. I think the only reason why I sort of feel like that might be a good idea is because I feel like there may have been people who did want to give public comments today that we couldn't hear from, who had legitimate comments. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
We could push this off for a week and allow folks to know they could comment on this during public comment next week, perhaps. We could put this on consent. Allow people to, who maybe weren't able to comment today, comment during public comment. Deputy Mayor.
I feel like we had more public comment on this when we've had public comment last week and this week. I feel very comfortable with where we're at on this. We also have updates to take place on this. I feel like we were very fair with public comment on this, personally.
Councilor Fong.
I have to agree. You know, we've had multiple meetings on this. This is now the second public hearing on the issue. We've had great demand from our community for many years on this issue, let alone these last, last 4 years. It doesn't make sense to add this topic again to a further meeting. In my personal opinion, it does impact our timeline of other topics we will have time to address this year or may not. So for that reason, I think I'm more ready to call the vote.
My only concern is I did receive one text message from a member of the public who was unable to participate because of the disruption. Mr. City Manager.
Your Honor, I got a similar message on both public hearings that somebody said they had their hand raised and weren't recognized.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, the council also has options. You have the opportunity to keep the public hearing open for written comments. You could give a deadline or a date and ask those who are unable to testify today to submit the written comments to the city clerk by X day, X time.
I would propose that we do that personally, that we would do that with both of these ordinances, frankly. Put them on consent for next week and take public hearing up until close of business Sunday, maybe. Yeah, written through Sunday. And then if anything comes up in that written, we can pull it off consent and have a conversation. I do agree with the Deputy Mayor and Councilmember Fowle. Yeah, I usually don't like pushing things further back when we've discussed them, but I do believe there's extenuating circumstances here personally.
So, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So you said close of business on Sunday, but there is no close of business on Sunday. So 5 o'clock?
Just say end of day Sunday.
Sorry.
Yeah, 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock Sunday.
Thank you to the city clerk.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shrebnick.
So that's a proposal, but
it's a proposal.
I would like to go ahead and call the question and see if we have the vote on at least for the first one on the trees.
Oh, calling the question is an actual thing that requires 2/3.
Second.
Okay, now we have to have a vote on calling the question, which requires the 2/3 to actually call the question. Now we have a motion and a second, so we actually have to do it. I recognize, but you made a valid motion and it got a second before I was able to put a stop to it. So now we have a motion and a second on the calling the question. Actually, there is no question in front of us. There's no question to call. Never mind, that's out of order. Because there was no motion in front of us. I would like to make a motion that we take both this business item as well as item B, place them on our next consent agenda, and advertise that people can send in written public hearing comments until 5 p.m. on Sunday. If anything substantive comes in that makes us change our mind, we can then take it off of consent. We have a motion and a second. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, your motion is to continue the public hearing to allow for written comments, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
That good.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Would the clerk please take the roll?
I will, one moment. Would you confirm who seconded the vote?
Councilmember Marshall?
Okay, Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Correct.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
No.
Councilmember File,
No.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
4 yeses, the motion passes.
Mr. Mayor, again, to clarify for the record, the motion included both public hearings, not one. I said a singular hearing, so I wanted to.
Yes,
clarify
no,
that.
I made both business item A and B
Thank
part
you.
of that. So with that, we'll move. Do we need any further discussion on the sign code item? Do we have any further questions on that piece? Councilor Fowle, do you have questions on that?
Yes, there were questions within tonight's public hearing. I believe the rabbi was discussing a concern about whether or not a future display would be allowed in relation to this new ordinance. I think that's a fair question for us to get some clarification on. There was a menorah that was in the public right of way. And went through a proper permitting process, and we was well received by our community. Personally, I support a diverse and welcoming community, as well does our council. So I'd like to a little clarification on this point, please.
So again, city attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, but based on the ordinance before you, the menorah would not be able to be placed on city property because it's in the public, semi-public zone, and that's considered an unattended display.
Except that a menorah or along with the speech that comes with it is protected a speech under the Constitution. So how do we ratify that, this communication?
So just if I may, if in the ordinance itself, highlight is showing you the revisions, but if you go above it a little bit, it might help clarify. So under subsection B, it actually says no temporary sign or display may be placed or left unattended on city-owned property, not including city right-of-way, within the public, semi-public zones, except for city-owned signs and city-owned displays for city business purposes. As you articulated, the menorah was in the right-of-way. This is specific to city-owned property, not the right-of-way, for unattended displays and unattended signs. That's a limited time of place, manner restriction without looking to the content of the message itself for one aspect of expression, again, unattended.
I appreciate that because this is some of the conversation we've had from community. And I think the clarification helps also better address the issue to our community and being responsible to the intent. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
I guess now I need further clarification. What I thought I heard was, and what I appreciate and support is that it would not be allowed because it would be unattended. Is that correct?
So We, on city property is
Yeah.
what the ordinance is for, but in the public right of way, it's my understanding that.
Well,
a
public
right
right of way, that's something separate.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I mean, on city property, which is what we're talking about, right? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I think that, I wholly support that. I think it underscores our separation of government from religion, and making sure that we are not expressing somehow government-sponsored religion. So I just want to be very clear about that, that I'm in full support of that and in full support of this ordinance.
Councilor Marshall?
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Shrevenick on that point.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor File?
Yes, I'd just like to provide some useful information to our council colleagues. MRSC has done a really great education for council members and municipal leaders and government on First Amendment rights. This is clearly defined, as it has also been addressed by our attorney tonight. I'd be happy to share the communication I received and the legalese also received with that webinar training. We wouldn't want to, cross the line constitutionally within our city. That would just be bad form.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Of course.
Thank you. Again, I would like to emphasize that the proposed regulation is a content neutral, time, place, manner restriction. It is not based on any type of message, political, religion, anything, as the recitals in your ordinance demonstrate. So that does meet the constitutional test to have a reasonable time, place, manner restriction for unattended displays and signs. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I know we started a little bit late, but I do think I would ask my council colleagues if they wanted to take a 5-minute break before we jumped into the transportation element.
Please.
Okay, 5 minute. Yeah.
Were we not going to vote on the signs yet?
No, we had pushed that off in the previous motion. to
That's right.
consent
Thank
till
you.
Next week. All right, we're taking a 5-minute break. We'll be back. Well, let's just make it 6.5. We'll be back at 9:40. Council. Kenmore City Council will return to order. Next on the agenda, transportation element of the comprehensive plan update presented by Engineering Director John Vicente. And guest.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We're here tonight to provide a follow-up on the transportation element update, pretty much responding to comments, questions from our presentation back in September. With me, I've got Alicia McIntyre with Parametrics. She's actually the lead with our consultant that's been helping us with this development, and she just happened to have been on vacation during our last meeting, so she wasn't able to attend, but we have her here tonight to take over the presentation so that I don't have to do it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alicia and she can begin the discussion.
Thanks, John. Thank you. Am I in charge of moving the slides? Okay, thank you. So thank you so much for having me here this evening. As John mentioned, I'm Alicia McIntyre. I'm with Parametrics, and I've been assisting John along with my team in the development of the transportation element update and the capital facilities plan update. And as he noted tonight, we're going to be reviewing the proposed edits in response to your September 19th comments. And then there's going to be a separate discussion of the transportation impact fee. So just a reminder, the purpose of the transportation element update is to reflect and support your recently adopted land use element. And these revised elements are going to be updated by the end of 2023. So just walking through the questions or the comments that were received the last discussion in September. The first question pertained to the King County Metro Park and Ride lease for the community club and the fact that it has been discontinued. And so we're proposing making a change in the element to remove the two references from the text and update figure T7, which did include identification of the community club parking. Similarly, on the topic of transit, question number 2 pertained to table number 2 that displayed several routes that are no longer in service. That table did include routes that were in operation in 2019, which reflected the text that preceded it. But to minimize any confusion, we did add a footnote to that table, or we're proposing to add a footnote to that table, noting the routes that were discontinued in fall of 2021. Question number 3 refers to a reference affiliated with the water taxi stop at the University of Washington. And so the language is being proposed to be modified that rather than reference the University of Washington, it would identify connections to destinations along Lake Washington and Lake Union, opening up that opportunity a little bit more. And I just wanted to clarify that page 628 referenced in this is in the clean version of the attachment for the element. Question number 4 references to had a question about the policy talking about carpools as the only option or as an option to reduce SOV use. And so we're recommending revising that policy language to talk about the use of carpools as well as other non-motorized modes of travel. Question number 5 discussed or what was asking about clean airplane fuels as part of Kenmore Air Harbor. So we're proposing a new policy that would support the use of non-leaded aviation fuel to reduce the risk of potential health impacts in areas near the air harbor. Question number 6 pertained to a policy about removing language on both sides of the street for development and whether or not this is consistent with our current practice. The city's current road standards only require developments to provide sidewalks on one side of the street where the development is occurring. New public roads would require sidewalks on each side of the road where newly created lots, structures, or driveways are proposed. And then on private roads, sidewalks are only required on one side of the street. So no changes are being proposed
in response to this particular policy. And then question number 7 asked if the draft plan identifies priorities for pedestrian and bicycle access to destinations. Objective number 3 does call out sidewalks and trail networks linking to community destinations, and policy 4.4.2 also identifies prioritization for bicycle facilities linking to key destinations. Question number 8 asks if the plan identifies providing bike parking as a policy. And we're recommending adding some clarifying language in policy T-8.2.3 to clarify that it would be bike storage, bike parking, and wayfinding to provide a little more specificity for this. Question number 9 was a 2-part question that pertained to freight. The first asking about freight percentages on I-5, and the second about Northeast 175th and whether or not that's considered a freight route. So the second question first, Northeast 175th is not considered a freight route by WashDOT, which is who sets the freight routing rubric that we use for the classifications. And then we did some research to look at freight percentages and just some data points. SR 522 historically has a higher percentage of heavy vehicles compared to total volumes for both I-405, I-5 and I-5. And post-COVID, those percentages are lower than both I-5 and I-405. However, in terms of absolute numbers, the overall volumes as well as heavy vehicle volumes on SR 522 are quite a bit lower than they are on I-5 or I-405. I'm sure you don't want me to read all of these numbers individually, but you can see that trend between 2012, the numbers, and then in 2017, and then how much they have reduced by 2022 across those 3 major facilities. And then finally, do we note sidewalks and parking on both sides of the street for cul-de-sacs? And policy T-4.3.3 identifies sidewalk placement on roads consistent with the city's current road standards. New cul-de-sacs would likely be a private road and require sidewalks on one side of the street per the city's road standards. And then another policy T-1.1.1 notes that the layered network provides for all varieties of street use, including parking. The city's road standards cover parking requirements for roadways, and for cul-de-sacs, on-street parking is allowed on both sides of the street, but is not required. And then finally, there are 2 figures in the draft element. One is the priority pedestrian network, and one is the priority bicycle network. And both of those, it looks like, unfortunately, the map is the same here. So, but in both instances, figures T18 and T19 showed previously routing of bicycle and pedestrian facilities through Swamp Creek. We are recommending a change. You can see where it bumps up around Swamp Creek and then would route on 73rd Avenue Northeast, Northeast 192nd Street, and 80th Avenue. Our presentation this evening.
Questions? Comments? I had one question. Let me. Nope, sorry, wrong topic. Any questions? All right, well, I'm not seeing anything, so must have done a bang up job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have traffic impact fees update presented by Engineering Director John Vicente. And guest.
And guest, yes. Good evening again. So we're going to be as part of the process for the transportation element, we're also updating the traffic impact fees. And to assist us with this, of course, Parametrics provided the services and they consulted with DKS Engineering, and we've got our consultant online who's going to be providing the presentation for us. Maria, are you there?
Yeah. Hi, John. I'm here.
and you can share screen.
Oh, I'll say, I didn't know if you were gonna do it or if you wanted me to do it. Hold on, give me 2 seconds. Screen. Hold on. And it's not opening, of course. Give me 10 seconds here. Want to make sure the right one is open. I'm working on it, I promise. That's great. All right. Can you see my screen?
We can't see your
I know.
presentation.
Sorry,
Oh, hold on.
it made me go out and back and out and back and out and back. So
Okay, we're almost there. We need to activate presentation mode.
and the button. Sorry, I have too many things on my screen. Do you know what that button is? Sorry to ask.
I think it's the bottom right next to the slider with the plus minus.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's right there.
Should have just.
To the right. There we go. I think that's
Thank
it.
you. I should have just made a PDF. But all right. Thank you for bearing with me. So yes, tonight I'm here to present the transportation impact fee update that we've been working on that goes along with the transportation element that Alicia was talking about. So a little bit of background. Of course, let me get rid of all this stuff so you guys can you guys see that okay?
Yeah, we can see it just fine.
All right, sorry. Okay, so just a little bit of background on what a traffic impact fee is. They are fees that are collected by local agencies, and it allows you to obtain revenue to pay for new public facilities. It also ensures that development is paying their fair share of their impacts to the transportation system that comes with development. And it also ensures that there are adequate public facilities that will be available to serve that growth that is coming from development. And then traffic impact fees are paid by new development. It helps reimburse the city. Of course, I can't see what's wrong here. There, better. Reimburses the city for development and making sure that their equitable share of the capital transportation project costs are covered. And the fees cannot exceed the proportionate share of the cost of these improvements. TIF rates are based on the proposed land uses from that development and the number of new person trips that are generated by that and added to the transportation system. And TIF revenue cannot be used for any sort of transportation operating or maintenance expenses. They have to be capital improvements. So why are we updating the TIF? Well, the State's Growth Management Act does require that there are regular updates to the TIF program. Your last impact fee program was updated and adopted in 2015. You have a new 2023 comprehensive plan in the transportation element, and that has removed several projects that have been completed and also added some new ones. So we want to make sure we're incorporating those. And then the cost of those transportation projects have increased over the years due to inflation. And there have been updates to project descriptions since the 2015 update. And then lastly, traffic patterns have changed and growth. Your forecasted land use the next 20 years has changed, and just how we see things, how the transportation system is changing. So we want to make sure that we're reflecting that and that we're consistent with the transportation element. So just a little bit of background of the TIF structure. So for this updated study, we've applied the same methodology that was applied in the 2015 study. However, we have all new inputs going into this process. There's a new 20-year transportation project list that we're including with their costs. And then we also have new numbers for looking at growth both in Kenmore and then regional trips or non-Kenmore traffic that would be using your system. And then we also have updated growth when we calculate what we think the next 20 years of PM peak hour person trips will be. So all of those new inputs that are coming out of the updated transportation element were put through that same methodology in the calculations to come up with the recommended fees. So just a little bit of comparison of what you currently have today in 2023. And then what we are proposing once this TIF is updated. We're calling it the proposed 2024 column. So looking at impact fee costs, the total cost of the transportation projects that are eligible for the TIF that come out of the transportation element are that 34.4 million that we show there. And then the new PM peak hour person trip ends that we calculated based on the growth for the new transportation element is that 724 person trips. And then when we get down to what the current TIF fee is, it's that cost per PM peak hour person trip end. So you currently are collecting $7,233.55 for each person trip end per development. And then based on all of those new inputs that we've put into the methodology, the proposed fee is $3,947. And then just to show what that equates to, the cost per a single family dwelling unit, you currently are collecting $11,773.39 per household. And with this new proposed fee, you would be collecting $5,863.94 per household. So as you can see, what we're proposing is it should be a 45% reduction due to the increase in forecasted future trips for the next 20 years. Just based on several factors, the growth in person trips has gone down. The cost in transportation projects is about the same. And then just to clarify that we do collect fees based on each land use, and the ITE trip generation manual has been updated since the 2015 plan. So we brought this new study and we're compliant with the 11th edition that's out. And there are quite a few revisions to some of the land use categories and the trip rates that are in there, but our update is consistent with that. And I think that's it. I'd be welcome to any questions.
Questions? Councilmember Shevnik?
Go first.
And was up first.
Okay. I do have some concerns about this piece. It's definitely a thorough analysis, or it has many steps, I should say. And I tried to review the whole thing in detail. I guess one of the things that I usually look for, and I think several of us do, is relationship of our fees to other cities. So I would love to see that. Understanding that every city is a little different, so it's a little bit comparing apples to oranges. I understand that, but it is nice to get a ballpark of where we're at relative to other cities. So that's one thing. But frankly, cutting the fees in half, I struggle with that passing kind of the straight face test in light of, you know, all of the future projects that we have. And knowing that, I mean, our experience tells us that our actual costs are, you know, much over our estimates, in many cases, twice what we estimate. I mean, we just had that demonstrated in the walkways and waterways. We're seeing that on 61st Avenue. I mean, these are transportation projects. So I guess I'm really struggling with that. And I think there was one more point I wanted to make around that. Let me just make sure I get it. Sorry. Oh, yes. I did see, I can't remember if it was in the slide deck, I think it was in the larger presentation, that it's based on the methodology used in 2015. But as we know, travel habits have changed pretty remarkably. It looked like there was some adjustments to that. All of the adjustments that I saw reduced the estimates, but again, while we may have remote work, which may reduce the vehicular travel, we're hoping to increase non-vehicular travel, and those paths are part of our tip. So it's not just about vehicular travel. So I feel like we're not fully appreciating in our analysis how travel has changed and will likely continue to change. I do understand that the cost per, it was one of the previous slide, a couple of slides ago, I think, the cost per trip end is reduced when you have a large increase in the number of people. And you have a static project, but I mean, that has to be taken with a grain of salt. If you have a lot of extra people, you have to build more facilities. So I guess I'm just struggling with the idea that we would actually not just cut a little, but cut in half the fees to developers, the impact fees to developers for new development, when we have such a massive list of projects and many more on the horizon that aren't in the tip. And I understand that it has to be based on the tip. So I say that fully understanding that it has to be based on what we have in that plan. So those are my comments.
Well, I can say when I say we're following the 2015 methodology, I do purely mean just the equations or the calculations that were used, but all of the inputs have been updated based on current information that we have available. So again, all of the information, the project estimate and the costs that come from the transportation element, we're using those. When we talk about, when I say like the Kenmore versus the non-Kenmore growth, and when we're coming up with converting vehicle trips into that multimodal person trips, all of the inputs from those are from the current PSRC demand models that are available to us. And those have the most current land uses and travel patterns and growth information that's available for us to use. So those are reflecting the most current information that we have. But I will say this is multimodal. I think, way back when we used to do TIF calculations just based on vehicle trips, but the modern way of doing that is a very multimodal approach. And we do take vehicle trips and we convert those to people trips. So we are accounting for growth in walking and biking and transit in addition to vehicle trips. And that does increase it a bit. But I think it more accurately represents the type of growth that we are seeing in Kenmore. I think the biggest reason that, again, following those calculations from before with these new inputs is we have about the same cost for the 20-year project list that's eligible, but we're actually seeing a big increase in the number of person trips that Kenmore is expecting to come from development the next 20 years. So when we do that, it's simply one number divided by the other. We're coming up with a smaller number.
And I also want to address your concern about the cost of projects and how that impacts the impact fee. The cost for this process, these were prepared last year with most current information. We have the option of updating the impact fees as often as we want to reflect changes in costs. So if we're seeing that costs are really skyrocketing in a couple of years, we can just update the study and change those fees. We also, as part of our fee schedule, we increase those per the cost of the COLA, the market. So when the fees get increased, the impact fees also get increased by that percentage as well. But we do have mechanisms to address unforeseen increases in construction costs or project costs. So.
Any other questions? Councilor File.
So I want to walk this through a little bit, like our residents might be listening at home. So in this analysis review, I would perceive our residents to think that this number assessment, the assessment you've made is a sign that things are changing in a different direction. Yet we as a council are hearing development in different ways, right? And so our planning department, for example, or permitting department, I don't know that this shows the calculation connection of future growth really in what's happening, more recently. I don't know that the calculation also ties into birthography rates, for example, which is something North Shore School District uses for anticipation of knowing how full their buildings are going to be. Builders often go off of those logs because it's very current. And understanding that there is a real deficit in transportation development and doing our part, fees. I'm a little bit awestruck tonight. So what would you say to our resident at home who's hearing what it sounds like you're saying, that the tides have changed so much that it's going to be less and not more, or at least status quo? I please help walk me there and help walk our community there, because I think this is a little bit confusing and I think it could be simplified.
Okay, well, I will do my best. I do know that the modeling data that we're using for the growth forecast start from like population forecasts and the land use that's, like your available lands inventory, your job forecast, all of that land use forecasting is part of the growth. And that's where that growth number of trips comes from. So it is very much embedded in a lot of very complex details and modeling that comes out of that. So to say that, I would say that's probably somewhat comparable to what you're talking about that the school district is doing for forecasting. The models and the tools that we were using are definitely the best that the industry has available for us to use for that. You also had a comment about just why the rates are going down. Sorry, I want to make sure I answer you precisely. I guess I do want to be clear. You had mentioned like we have needs today. The use of traffic impact fees are really clear. They can only be used to construct improvements that mitigate deficiencies that come from growth from development. So if there are existing deficiencies in the system, the TIFs cannot be used for that. They have to be tied to the amount of growth that we are forecasting that we're going to have in the next 20 years. So there are some projects on the transportation element list that aren't eligible. The maintenance for sure is off. Any sort of staffing or operations, any of those kind of costs, which are very expensive. A lot of cities, their maintenance fees can sometimes outweigh their capital project list costs. I'm not sure Kenmore particularly, but once we get down to the cost of eligible projects that meet the criteria for a TIF project list, and then we look at what's only can be attributed to growth, this is the findings that we come to when we start looking at, if they have to pay their fair share, we really can't ask them for more. Though I will add, we did follow the methodology of the 2015 study. That's what, we were asked to do, but there is some flexibility in that. I mean, the state does require that you have an impact fee and then it follows all the rules that I just highlighted. But there are some changes that you can make in your methodology if you want to. Like, you guys are choosing to use person trips. We can choose how we decide what some of the growth numbers are. So I would say there's a little flexibility in the methodology that we're applying, but it is fairly consistent with what the other cities in the PSRC area are doing.
And when you say there's a little bit of flexibility, what do you see there that we might consider in Kenmore?
I'd have to go back, I guess, and look in all of the different calculations that we have, but there are a little bit of flexibility of maybe how we come up with the person trips. There's also just some projects, and again, I don't have the transportation element project list in front of me, sorry. But there are some just general projects I want to say in there for, like upgrading pedestrians and upgrading the different pedestrian. I don't know if we want to just say we're spending more money on those. And sorry, Alicia, not that we want to go back and change things in the transportation elements project list. But if the list had more cost and eligible projects, the TIF would go up, I guess, to meet those. I don't know if there's a need or desire to spend more money on some of those.
We have a pretty progressive slate of projects for pedestrian safety improvements, sidewalks, ADA updates, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and if I may add, so when we put together the project list, it has to be a list that we can reasonably say that we can do within that time period. We can't include every project. For example, we have a pedestrian facilities plan, which has 163 projects. We can't include all 163 in a 20-year period because there's no way we can do 163 projects in 20 years. So I had to look at how much work we could do within that time period. But also something to realize is that the capital facilities plan does include projects that are not eligible for this calculation. For example, the ADA transition program, the pavement over preservation, those cannot be used in the calculation, and those are a big dollar amount on top of it. So we have to look at all of those projects and say, okay, these are the ones that are eligible. This is what we are only able to consider in our calculation, and these are only the projects that we can reasonably say we can build. And then once we assess the fee, we also have to make sure that the fee that we're assessing, we can justify it. And so we want to make sure that whenever we're saying this is the fee we want, we have to be able to say that this is the reason why we can charge this fee, and here's the reasons why, and here are the impacts that these private developers are causing, and that's why it equates to this amount for each development. So it's a very complicated process, and it's hard to break it down into real simple terms, but.
Yeah, I really appreciate this. I think this helps answer some of the questions our community might have at home because it is a complicated issue. And I think it also helps welcome near to where we're going here and within the guardrails of what we have to work with. Thanks.
And I will re-emphasize that this is a planning document. And so we're kind of guessing on a lot of things, but we do have the opportunity to update it whenever we feel that it needs to be updated. So we're not restrained by what we put in here, we're stuck with for 10 years. We can update it whenever we want to if we feel it needs to be looked at.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kugler.
Actually, you touched on my question a little bit, which is that if we, so it's been almost 10 years since we last adopted the last TIF. And if it turns out that we are not on track with the planning document, can we adopt a new TIF rate in 5 years, or what is the regular frequency, or is it up to us?
I'm not certain if there's any requirement or any maximum period you have to wait for the update. My understanding is it can be updated whenever we deem it necessary. Our code states that it's just based off of a traffic impacts or a traffic study. So if we complete a whole new one, we can then through resolution change the fee. What we would have to do is if we decided to alter our projects to incorporate in there, we'd have to then do an amendment to the capital facilities plan within the comp plan so that that is consistent with our what we calculate. So, but there are mechanisms out there that we can make changes. It's just process.
Okay, that helps. I think, I mean, I'm feeling the same way as some of the other fellow council members, which is I understand that you did the math. This is what it resulted in. It just doesn't seem logical to us, I think. So, you know, given that prices continue to increase and inflation and everything, it just doesn't make sense, but thank you.
I had one small question. I was a little surprised when I saw in there that apparently we're charging transportation impact fees to schools.
That is correct.
So like North Shore School District is, you know, getting permits right now to upgrade Kenmore Elementary. We're charging the school district traffic impact fees.
That is my understanding. There is an exemption that is allowed for low-income housing and other public benefit projects. So it is possible that they could get an exemption from that, but I'm not 100% certain. Our code does allow certain exemptions.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Fowle, did you have your hand up?
No, but to that topic effect, the school board has been clear that if this is something that we can do, something that actually helps work towards the common good, and they are encouraging of it.
Any other comments? All right, well, I'm not seeing any further comments and no action is required at this time, if I'm reading that correctly. Or am I on the wrong thing? Nope, no action is required.
No
Okay.
action, no.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
All right, next, Charter for Financial Sustainability Plan Task Force presented by Finance Administration Director Melinda Morrell for approval.
Good evening, Council. As you recall, we had our last FSP that was adopted in 2020, and we've been implementing those recommendations since then. However, the fiscal landscape has changed such that our ability to pay our bills going forward will be more difficult. So this has been caused by high inflation, increase in our police services contract, and ongoing resources that are being funded now by one-time money that need ongoing funding sources. So this topic was brought up at our retreat, at your retreat this summer, and it was approved as one of the top 5 priorities. So what is coming to you today is the first step, which is creating a charter to create a task force for the financial sustainability plan. And so that's in your packet. So this task force will be made up of residents and or business owners or workers. There will be 7 people on the task force. At least 2 will have financial backgrounds, and people will be able to apply for this task force. And then City Manager Rob Carlindsey will decide on who ultimately becomes members. So I'm bringing this to you to approve the charter.
Questions, comments? Councilmember Kugler.
Well, I think this is essential that we move forward with this, and so I'm in support of it.
Mr. City Manager.
This charter follows the same model of the charter that was used in 2020.
Councilmember File.
Just want to thank you. This was one of those items we brought back from our mid-year retreat and saw a high priority need. So it's timely, and I look forward to the work yet ahead and having that come back to us rather timely. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the charter for the Financial Sustainability Plan Task Force.
So moved.
Second, Councilmember File.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
Thank you, Mayor Herbeck. On the motion to approve the Financial Sustainability Task Force Charter, Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Mayor Herbeck.
Yes.
All in favor, and the charter is approved.
Next on the agenda, Walkways and Waterways Bond Measure Final Report presented by City Manager Rob Carter-Lindsay, Parks Project Manager Maureen Kalitzi, and Senior Civil Engineer Kent Vaughn.
While Michelle is pulling up the presentation, our Parks Project Manager, Maureen Kalitzi, is joining us virtually. Maureen, are you there?
Maureen, can you hear us?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Great. All right. All right, can you all see? Look at that. It says final report. Isn't that great? So excited to be part of this presentation tonight. This is a big deal, huge milestone. The final milestone, perhaps. Did you all receive the final report in the mail? Yeah, pretty cool, huh? Yeah, that was pretty cool to get that in the mail, but this has been a long time coming. And I've got the two stars of the show here, Kent Vaughn, who managed projects on Juanita Drive and 68th Avenue, and Maureen Kalitzi, who managed the projects at Tlahwadis Park and also Log Boom Park. The fifth project was managed by Ann Stanton a few years ago, but she retired. Let's go to the next slide. Am I in control here? I am in control here. All right, it's getting late. Can you see I'm getting a little weird? All right. So this was, like I said, in our quarterly newsletter. And this slide summarizes how we got here. And I'd even go back to prior to 2015. I think from the moment I got here in 2012 and probably before, the public was saying, get me to the water and we need more pedestrian bicycle safety. And then Caleb and Sarah were killed in 2014 and that rocked the community. And that really put things into a higher gear, I would say. And so in 2015, we started the Imagine Kenmore process, and it was probably one of the biggest, most comprehensive community engagement efforts I had ever done in my career up to that point. And we just did a lot of meetings and online interactive methods and statistically valid surveys and other ways of reaching out to the public, open houses, and just saying, hey, when it comes to this stuff, what do you want? What would you like to see? And so we had just a lot of people participate, and it was a really good process. And I'm really proud of all the work that went into that back in 2015 and then into 2016 as well. And you can see that last bullet there, that the public really confirmed that pedestrian bicycle safety and connecting with the water and the open spaces were really their top priority. We asked them about other things such as athletic fields and other things, and those did not rise to the top. It was connecting with the water and open space and pedestrian bicycle safety. So after we heard all that feedback, Walkways and Waterways was born. And so we put together 5 projects that we thought would best meet what we were hearing from the public and what their needs were. And so those 5 projects are 68th Avenue, pedestrian bicycle safety, Juanita Drive, pedestrian bicycle safety, Log Boom Park, waterfront, Tlahuadis waterfront, and Rhododendron Park boardwalk. Those were the 5 projects. Those were the ones that we brought to the ballot in November of 2016. And a bunch of Kenmore residents worked hard to advocate for passage. Councilmember Shrebnick, Nicole Suarez, and Mayor Herbig, as residents, advocated for the passage of that. And as you can see up there, 64% of the voters said yes. 60% was required by state law whenever you do a bond, whenever you issue debt for the public to approve. It needs 60% of the voters to approve, and 64% said yes. So we saw that as clear direction to move forward and keep marching in that direction. So they said yes, and very soon thereafter, we went and got a bond rating from Standard & Poor's in order to be able to issue the debt. We were pleased to see that Standard & Poor's gave us a AAA bond rating, and you can see the term of the bonds there. Oh, and there's AAA rating right there. And here's some things that you saw in the newsletter, but this is a comparison of what we said back in 16 and then what actually happened. So back in 2016, we thought the total project cost would be about $25 million. Total cost ended up being $45 million. Why and what happened there? A couple things. One is when you're doing cost estimates on a project that does not have significant design on it, it's difficult to figure out it's just difficult to project what the costs will be. That was the main issue there, is just very little design had been done on the projects. So as we got more and more into design, inflation took off over the years, the costs ballooned up to 45 million. So that's the bad news, but there is some good news. First of all, we didn't have to go back to the voters. You can see that the amount of the bond that we went to the voters for remained the same. And we didn't have to go back to the voters. We didn't have to significantly or noticeably reduce the scope of the project. And we didn't have to raise taxes or change the Walkways and Waterways promise at all. And why was that? How were we able to do that? Mainly through the resourcefulness of my coworkers. They were amazing in going after external funding, including grants and getting the utility companies to pay their fair share of the project costs. And so thanks to the resourcefulness of my coworkers, we're able to meet that increased cost without cutting back on the project or having to go back to the voters for more funding. And then the timeline, we're just slightly ahead of schedule. We cut the ribbon on the last project, Juanita Drive, in May of 2023. Substantial completion actually took place in September of 2023. So we still beat the deadline that we told the voters by just a couple of months. And back in 2016, we knew we had to be conservative on the timeline because we were dealing with multiple funding sources and multiple agencies and getting permits, especially when it came to the water. So we made sure we gave ourselves plenty of time. And during the time that voters were considering it, I thought to myself, it's 2016, are they going to vote yes on something that's going to happen so far into the future? And they did. Lastly, we told voters that this would cost them $11.68 per month based on a median household back then. And on $1 million house here in 2023, it's costing voters $10.94. So a little bit less than what we told them, which is good. So here are the major funding sources. And again, you saw this in the newsletter, and so did all of our residents. I won't go into much detail here, but the asterisk there, other funding sources included 1% for art, the REIT, impact fees, and some money from the Strategic Opportunities Fund. And I think this graph is telling. It shows the overall property tax and what our property owners pay in total property tax. As you can see, if you combine our regular operating property tax combined with the Walkways and Waterways bond, we're about 10% of the total property tax pie. All right, I'm going to turn the time over to Kent, and he's going to talk about 68th Avenue and Juanita Drive.
68th Avenue project. So we're finally complete. The goal was to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety and provide a safe route for peds and bikes from the north city limits down to into downtown. We started the design of this project back in March of 2017, and it's been six years to get this thing done. Construction began in March of 2021 and took roughly 2 years to build. The project cost came in at approximately $12.8 million, which was under budget for this project, funded by the Walkways and Waterways bond of $5 million, grant from Department of Ecology to build the surface water improvements, a substantial amount from North Shore Utility District listed here, and other city funds. Go to the next. So what did we gain with the 68th project? 1.5 miles of buffered sidewalks, 3 miles of bike lanes, a brand new stormwater system with stormwater detention and water quality, some landscaping, brand new streetlights along the corridor, speed feedback signs along the corridor, and an improved school zone signage and flashing. The impacts to building 68th, roughly of the 130 some trees that were in the right of way of the 68th corridor, we had to remove 27 of them. But we were able to plant 193 trees along the corridor and within Wallace Swamp Creek Park, which is primarily the most of those trees were planted. So for a net gain of 166 trees. Before and after, you can see that 68th was pretty unsafe to walk. Narrow shoulders. With the improvements, we're able to separate the peds from the traveled way, bike lanes, and brand new sidewalks for the entire length of the corridor.
And that's actually my daughter in the before picture, and she and I risked our lives to take that picture. And but now you don't have to risk your life to walk in that exact same spot. So it's pretty darn cool. She's a junior at Western Washington University now. So
we've received a lot of compliments too on this project and the aesthetics of it. And you can see people walking all the time. It's been a real improvement.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of comments out and about in the community about the black-eyed Susans in particular. They really like them. So
Juanita Drive, similar goal to improve ped and bike safety and provide a continuous sidewalk and bike lanes from the south city limits into downtown Kenmore. The project costs roughly $18 million. Walkways and waterways funded $5 million of that. We were able to leverage the Walkways and Waterways funds to get grants to help pay for this, roughly $6 million from Washington State DOT, Sound Transit, Ecology, and the Department of Commerce. Again, we started the design of this project back in March of 2017. We went to construction in July of 2020, and it took roughly a little over 3 years to get the substantial completion. This was a really challenging project, had a lot of surprises in the ground. We really had a lot of utility conflicts that we had to deal with, coupled with a King County concrete strike, which set us back 4 months, and some contractor performance issues. But we're substantially complete now. We do have some punch list items remaining, but we should be complete by the end of the year.
So notice Kent's demeanor, how calm he is and everything. Super stressful. I can't even imagine the stress he must have gone through to manage all the difficulties on these projects, especially Juanita Drive. It was a bugger, and you probably don't even really want to relive it, do you? Or even
No,
think
I'm kind of
about
glad
it.
it's done, actually. But I'm really happy with the way it turned out. There's always some things where you'd like to see it maybe a little bit differently, but such as.
So let's go ahead and talk about how it was all worth it. You ready for this? Here we go.
So here's the list of what we gained with the project. Of course, the 1.5 miles of sidewalk, 3 miles of buffer bike lane. We also added some capacity for vehicles making left turns into side streets, so that these vehicles can get out of the way and people don't, go around them into the bike lanes. We improved the crossings at the side streets, speed feedback signs. We did some illuminated art in the medians, and we're still working at getting those completely up and running. But of course, the brand new stormwater system, all new conveyance, detention with a brand new pond, and multiple water quality facilities in the ground, and the new street lights, LED street lights. The impact of Juanita Drive, of the roughly 400 trees within the corridor, there was an impact to get this project built. Roughly 156 trees were removed. We were able to plant 184 trees, which gave us a net total increase of trees of 28 trees. But this was a very tree-lined corridor, and to increase the footprint the way we had to build the sidewalk, would compromise roots, and those trees would have to be removed.
Yeah, and the primary objective was pedestrian and bicycle safety, but the environmental benefits are huge. Kent was able to get a substantial Department of Ecology grant for Juanita Drive to address water quality and improve the health of our streams.
It's essentially a brand new street.
Yeah.
So before and after photos, you can see how Juanita Drive didn't really have much in the way of ped bike safety. And in the end, we've got continuous sidewalks buffered by both a landscaped amenity strip and buffered bike lanes. A real improvement.
All right, thanks, Kent. All right, we're going to turn the time over to Maureen Kalaisi, and she'll talk about Log Boom Park. Here we go.
Good evening. Just to start off, to say that these projects are really meaningful to me, both of them in very different ways. And then I want to compliment Ann Stanton for her contributions for all of the work that she's done for Kenmore, but for the rhododendron project. This project goes way back to incorporation. I think there was always a desire to see and be in Lake Washington at Log Boom Park. It had once had a historic beach, and so people wanted it. Prior to the improvements, the water access was only 60 lineal feet, and the west side of the park was underdeveloped. Again, a 2005 vision, our park's master plan, took 17 years for it to become a reality. Next slide, please. With only 3.9 acres, 1 acre of infrastructure improvements as described here, with the most significant change includes the expansive 150 lineal feet of water access, beach access, and the addition of a boat rental building and picnic shelter. And ADA accessibility is key on this project, and it was achieved through that large promenade concrete pathway through the park, the gravel path through the western section, and we were able to achieve ADA access to the beach with a ramp and also our water access ramp for boating. And afterwards, we were able to include a beach wheelchair, which was requested by some of our community, specifically a mother of a child who really wanted to get to the water. So that's available in our boat rental building if you ever needed it. Next slide. Well, the project also protects 1 acre of wetlands. Of that 3.9 acres, you have 1.5 acres of the infrastructure, 1 acre of wetland, and 1/2 acre of riparian shoreline. As you can see, the majority of the park is environmentally sensitive. The entire park is within the wetland buffer. So we did have a lot that we needed to do to enhance the park. And these statistics here are wonderful additions. I think what makes it really unique, some of the additions of the habitat boulders, the habitat logs along the shoreline. And just to be clear, 5,000 square feet of restored shoreline along Swamp Creek and Tualadees Park is an enhancement that was necessary as off-site mitigation for this project. Next slide. I think that the before and after photos really speak for themselves. Without impacting wetlands, that is the key thing that I want to talk about here. We were able to create this open space for countless hours of water access, recreation, and views to the water. It's phenomenal. I think that our community has embraced this project more than I ever thought. Next slide.
I would agree. All right, next slide is Tualadees.
At the confluence of the Swamp Creek and the Smemis River, Tualadees Park is unique and had been in need of restoration and park infrastructure for over 30 years. Undeveloped since purchased in 1991, invasives, limited public access, no park infrastructure, 1/2 acre of man-made lagoon, 12-acre site on the west side, with a little over 1/2 acre developed as a residential parcel. That's something to be said on the condition of the property before we actually did any design or construction. Sorry.
Way of saying it was there were mountains of invasive Himalayan blackberries.
Yes, and a lot of reed canary grass.
Yes.
There's these stats here speak for themselves. I know that Kent speaks a lot to grants. $2 million in grants was a big deal for this project with many sources. Recreation Conservation District with the largest, as well as the Commerce Grant with over almost $1 million. And then other funding sources with King Conservation District, King County Trail Levy funding, which also paid towards the park log boom parks project. So that was a big effort for us to get those grants, and then also grants come with a lot of details that you have to be able to speak to in order to be reimbursed for them. So anyway, a lot of effort in those grants. And the park, in terms of timing, went under construction in December of 2021, right before Christmas. Merry Christmas to myself and others who had to just keep moving forward on construction. And then it was really, I think, incredible. The contractors, really set a schedule for themselves to try to be as complete as possible by spring of 2023, and they met that goal. And now what we need to work on for this project, it is in substantial completion mode, but we have permit conditions to be met. We have to continue meeting those. We have a few punch list items. We have plant establishment through the spring of 2024. And we have one condition on the boardwalk that will need repaired related to transitions at turns along the boardwalk. Next slide. Okay, so what did we gain? We gained a lot, as you can understand, with an undeveloped site, 1.5 acres of infrastructure. The list is long, as you can see, but the thing that is most notable about the site is the waterfront plaza, the elevated boardwalk bridges, and over the 2 waterways and 4 viewing decks. I believe when you really look at the site and you see how it's laid out, the infrastructure of that pedestrian flow between the west side to the east side and in and around the water, without those amenities, it doesn't matter if we had a restroom or not, so to speak. But and the other thing that I wanted to talk about is developing a park from no utilities is definitely a task. You've got not just stormwater requirements to meet and irrigation, but the water and sewer connections and services are a big task, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of coordination with those agencies, PSC and NUD. And it was easy to work with them in a lot of ways, but the process is long and takes a lot of effort. So it's no easy task there.
And Maureen, there was a large King County sewer trunk line going east and west.
Oh yes.
Talk about
that on both my projects. Log Boom Park and Walkways Park both had the same trunk line running through them. On Log Boom, it happened to be on King County's property, but that was a big concern for us, is making sure that we were completely staying on the City of Kenmore's property, which you may not have understood that that park shares land on King County's property as well as our own property within that 3.9 acres. And then they own another 2.5 to 3 acres to the north. And on this project, the trunk line ran kind of diagonally through the park, through the waterfront plaza, across the lagoon and to the other side. And so there were a lot of conditions that we had to meet with how we designed the boardwalk and that waterfront plaza to try to meet their future needs if they were to need to get into our facilities.
In fact, if you go to the plaza, you'll see the railing going around the plaza, but you'll see this kind of odd wheeled structure that is the railing. And Maureen, can you speak to why?
Sure. We were trying to work with King County in a way that would assist them if they were needing to have access to the portion of their easement that goes across the lagoon. And that was kind of a design intent to try to assist them if there were a need for them to do any maintenance in that area without it being a permanent structure that would be in their way. And the other thing is the boardwalk connection on the other side of the lagoon that kind of crosses sideways along the lagoon. It is designed in a certain way that if they could get to do this in enough advance notice, they could actually lift a portion of the boardwalk up and over to allow them to maintain that area where the boardwalk is over the section of the lagoon. So there was a lot of coordination with King County as well that we had to do. Thank you for remembering that.
And coordinating that sort of thing is no small chore.
Yeah, this is a unique project in the sense that it's very, I should say, with, I don't know, detailed oriented, but complex. I guess that's the best word to describe this site that we had to do this work on, is the complexities between the environmental and working with all of the agencies that were tied to this site. Definitely was a big task. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. So in terms of environmental enhancements, again, these amenities that I said created a sense of place above or on the water for viewing and enjoying 4.5 acres of protected sensitive natural resources. That's what makes this site so unique. You're able to then really view and be with these environmental improvements in a way that are very intimate. Again, we created an acre of wetland. There's over 600 lineal feet of restored protection fencing around all of these areas. 1/2 mile of stream restored, which is a pretty cool statistic. Again, 4.5 acres of the enhanced wildlife habitat. Yeah, it's a really wonderful site. When you read the stats of how many plants that were planted, it's kind of crazy.
In fact, Maureen, could you speak to that? There's 5,600 trees planted. How is it possible that so many trees could be planted in such a small area?
Well, a lot of them are actually stakes, live stakes, they refer to them, and they're located along the Swamp Creek, each side of Swamp Creek, as part of that restoration and the mitigation, off-site mitigation for log boom. They're willow stakes, and so they will be trees as they mature. And then a lot of the other plants that you probably see now are pretty small in their size, but they will enlarge as larger trees as time goes by. We're also seeing some recruited trees, which some are okay, but we have to actually try to control them. They are alder and cottonwood and other invasives like laurel and Scots broom. We're seeing them recruit themselves by seed source, usually to the site, and that's actually kind of considered a weed for us right now, because we want the plants that we did plant to be established and the dominant features per our environmental permit requirements. So some of those recruited seed sources we're trying to maintain right now by removing them as they are still a weed. Helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next slide. I don't have a lot to say about this transformation in terms of before and after. It's just dramatic, and it is truly a transformation of what our design was set out to do. I think that's the other thing that's really hard for a lot of people, is understanding design in terms of space on the ground, 3-dimensional change. And that's what the design process is all about. And trusting that the design will come to fruition is part of the process that, and the many stages in design that we went through, from the concepts that went to voters, 30% design that went to council in early 2018, through to 60% when you start having to deal with material choices, and 90% to tie to all your permits, and then the final design that goes out to the contractors for bidding. It is certainly a process, and that's the interesting thing about the before and after is that you sort of have to trust your design. And I think that we've vetted it very well with both council and the community and the design team, with the staff, that all of the projects that we've been working on, those designs have really, I think, been true to what our intent was that the voters voted for. Next slide. Rhododendron Park, and Rob, thank you so much for noting this. It was led by Ann Stanton, and I want to acknowledge her for her contributions. She and I worked together for several years, and I've learned a lot from her. And this project truly creates access to the water for the park that doesn't even have a view to the Sammamish River. And that's the thing that I think is so unique about this project is, it really gets you to the water. It was a smaller project in terms of its size and its costs, but boy, did it produce a big living impact. The elevated boardwalk and the pathways from 68th and the bridge area have really helped gain people access to the water. And I think what's really unique about it is our 1% for the artworks. 3 cedars really help guide people to view the water in rhododendron, in that rhododendron enclosed park area. It really helps tell you how to get there. Next slide. And again, this is the boardwalk, was created over wetland and through wetland buffer. It provided this opportunity for restoration. And I think that's the unique thing this project also did, was a lot of restoration was done, although you don't really notice it as you were walking through the site, because you just think all of that is naturally there. But really it was a part of the plan to restore that area in terms of removing invasives, as you can see on the left in the before and then after, some of the trees and alders and other things that have grown into that area. And of course you can see the 3 cedar post to guide your way. Next slide. That is a great segue to public art. I want to also acknowledge that the funding that we received for the 1% for the arts on these projects also included $65,000 or so of the 68th Avenue pedestrian project. They were not able to really do public art for that project, and those funds went towards the public art at our 3 parks. And that contribution was very significant. When you think about 1%, it's not a whole lot of money. It is a challenge for artists to really provide significant artworks. And so any additional funding that we were able to bring to this project assisted the artists to develop these, I would say, breathtaking and very place-making art pieces for the Pride Parks. Jennifer Dixon's created a theme, a conveyance theme for the artworks in all 3 Walkways and Waterways parks, the idea of water, tree, and land. Next slide. And then I also want to acknowledge that we received support for and donation art from the Kenmore Heritage Society, who hired Tulalip Coast Salish artist Ty Juvenile, who you are familiar with. If you know, he did the story pole in Town Square. I had such a great time working with Ty. He's a pretty quiet soul, but he creates really vibrant art. It really made a difference when these art pieces went in. They create a cultural story, that really ties well to our park. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that our artworks are receiving their plaques. In fact, artist Jen Dixon has been supporting those plaques, not only for her artworks, but for also ties at the park. And she is also will be installing at Rhododendron and at Log Boom Parks. And so you'll have permanent plaques that you'll be able to read the stories of these art pieces in the future. And with that, this completes my presentation. Thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure working on these projects for the City of Kenmore.
Thank you so much, Maureen. We're almost done here. Just got to, this is really just the last slide. So lessons learned from the project. So back in 2015 and 2016, we actually did have professional engineering and landscape architect firms give us cost estimates, but back then there was very little design done. So I think a lesson learned there would be to either get more design done up front so you can have a better estimate of the costs, or use more recent examples to better estimate costs. So for example, now that we have some good projects under our belt, I think if we were to go do other similar projects, I think we'd have a better ability to do more accurate cost estimating. Also, some of the drawings we did for some of the street projects were very engineer-y. That word is not supposed to be engineered, it's supposed to be engineer-y. And I think, you know, the way we did it with the parks was cartoony, might be too strong of a word, but it was, I think we could have used renderings like that to make it more easy for the public to understand and decipher. Because when project elements started to be installed on Juanita Drive, I think the public was like, what? And I think we could have, it was all there, but it was very engineering and hard for the layperson to understand. So I think that's a lesson learned. And then overestimate on construction timeline. Construction always takes longer than you originally think. And in case of Juanita Drive, due to things beyond our control, it took a long time. But then the last one there, the lesson reconfirmed is that we just have this amazing team of people who managed these projects through some really difficult challenges, through a pandemic, supply chain, labor shortages, contractor challenges, all those things. And their ability to get the resources needed to see the projects across the finish line. You know, I like to think of Maureen and Kent as like orchestra conductors, except for their orchestra that they have to conduct is even more complex than a typical orchestra. Think about all of the stakeholders, the public, the designers, the engineers, the permit agencies, the grant agencies, the contractors, the project managers, the inspectors, who am I missing? And others, that they have to manage and conduct that orchestra. So I just really want to give just a big thank you to both Kent and Maureen for this. And then I also want to thank the entire city team. Kent and Maureen were the orchestra conductors, but it took the entire city team to pull this off, from permitting to engineering to finance to city clerk to the surface water department. All of us had to chip in and give our contribution to this park. Maybe the only department that I can think of that maybe didn't contribute as much as maybe the municipal court. Maybe they didn't contribute, but besides them, everybody had a hand in this project. And so I'm just super grateful to be part of this team and what this team pulled off. So thank you so much.
Questions, comments? Councilmember Fowle.
Thank you. I just couldn't be more proud of our city, our partners and stakeholders, our staff and faculty who all made this possible. Also, the great work lifted by Councilmember Shrevenick herself in really driving this to the community was just incredible. So that just has to go recognized. But this is an immense amount of work, beautiful, and I want to stand up and applaud our staff. This is incredible. When you say the only thing missing is maybe our municipal courts, we might be able to create a pathway for them. They are saying that they do need some community service opportunities, and I'm sure we might be able to have some in Kenmore. So there might be more to do, but I do know there are a few projects that are still left out, in the works. But this is an exciting day for sure. Thank you.
Any other comments? Deputy Mayor.
I'm just going to be brief, but I really want to applaud you and thank you. Thanks staff for the beautiful work and the notable changes to our community. I'm keeping this brief because it's late, but you do deserve lauding from each of us for how wonderful these projects turned out for our community. Thank you.
One more department I should have mentioned, Public Works Operations was huge in this because they're the ones that had to accept and now maintain. And so they played a role in the design. Quinn Profit was often kind of joined at the hip with Maureen, right, Maureen? Yeah, and of course, Jennifer Gordon and the other maintenance workers on the team. And so now they've inherited these projects and they're doing the maintenance. And so hats off to them as well.
Might see us walking up and down wanting to drive this week with Quinn. So we're looking at all the trees and plants that we planted and see what needs to be replaced or whatnot. So.
I want to reiterate what my colleagues have already said and thank Maureen and Kent and Anne and everybody for all of the work that went into this. If I were to walk away from council right now, this project alone would be enough to justify at the time. It's transformative to our community and it's going to be appreciated, I think, for generations. So, thank you. Staff report.
Yeah, a couple of things, Your Honor. So I did have a bit of a reaction to Mr. O'Brien's comments earlier today during public comment. Usually I don't dignify his comments with a response, but in this case, when he was disparaging and maligning my staff, I feel like I needed to. And actually, I wish I would have done it a couple of weeks ago as well, when he claimed that my staff suppressed documents. I looked into that. That is absolutely not true. And so I just feel it's important for me to defend my coworkers when they're disparaged in public. I would like to give a little report on the asphalt plant. So they did their test in January and it didn't pass muster, their quality testing. And so the asphalt plant voluntarily went into idle status. So the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency did not put them into idle status. The asphalt plant voluntarily put themselves into idle status. If they had not, the air quality agency may have eventually anyway. But what happened is then they worked on their equipment, tried to improve it, and then they did a retest in mid-August. And the results aren't going to be available for up to 120 days from the mid-August testing date. But then we just recently learned that they've gotten out of idle status and now they're operating again. How can that be? Well, we do think they're doing it at their own risk. And it is the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency that is regulating this and whether they can be operating or not. One possible explanation is they saw some preliminary results of the testing that looked favorable. So they felt like they could start operating again. But again, I believe that it is at their own risk, because if they do not pass the test, if the final results come in and they did not pass, then I think they could be subject to fines for all the days they have been testing. And I've asked for a meeting with the new executive director of the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. I just got an email back from her assistant saying she's traveling and really busy for the month of October, and they're suggesting sometimes for me to meet with them in early November, which is a long ways away in my opinion. But we will continue to stay in touch with Puget Sound Clean Air Agency and do all we can as staff to advocate for the residents and businesses of our city. So that's my report on the asphalt plant.
Councilor reports and comments. There's an item on here, debrief from the roundtable town hall meeting from the 28th. I generally thought it was a pretty good event. Does anybody have any thoughts on the event? The issues? Councilor Kugler?
I actually got positive feedback from several of the attendees who said they really enjoyed it and appreciated it, and asked that we do more of them. And I thought the tables I sat at were really great. Got a lot of really positive feedback about the CAPE program. People feel like it's working.
Councilor Marshall?
I sat with Chief Moen, at least during the first part of it, and I thought that his interaction with the public was especially well done. I mean, a great approach and he handled it very well.
Councilor File?
Thank you. I also agree. It went really well in talking to our community who attended, and after the event, they felt that they could have more poignant time on issues they really care deeply about, and a better direct response, and felt it was better than a larger sit down and listen kind of forum. So it definitely sounds like we're better serving our community, and I'd be happy to do further in the future.
Anything else on this one? Mr. City Manager?
Yeah, so my coworkers and I, we had a debrief on this, and we collected a lot of themes and comments that were provided at all the different tables. So there was quite a lot of feedback and ideas on how to make Kenmore even better. So we've compiled all those. As far as how the meeting actually went, we did come up with some ideas on, if you want to do this again, on how to make it even better next time. One is, I think the public was kind of surprised by my presentation. I think they came here thinking they were going to get just time with you guys, and so for them to sit through my presentation was a surprise and unexpected. So if we were to do that again, I think we should be more clear up front on what the agenda is going to be, so that they can say, oh, okay, I've got to sit through the city manager's presentation or not. And then another thing is just the noise. Folks couldn't hear. And so other ideas might be to take it to a whole other venue where the noise is better, or perhaps keep this wall closed and send some folks over there, maybe send some folks back here, maybe a group out in the lobby, just so we can hear a little bit better. And Stephanie or Michelle, help me out. There was something else about the meeting and what we should have done to make it better. Okay, all right, but those were some ideas. But is this something that you'd like to do again?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. And did you like having it just on a bunch of general topics like this?
I mean, I think it worked out pretty well. I think people were able to get questions answered. Deputy Mayor?
I actually think it might be also interesting if we do have a few, maybe single topic or couple topics, fewer topics, where multiple council members could be talking about the same issue at tables, so that, anyway, it's just a thought, but I thought it was great. I was really thankful to see such a wonderful turnout, not surprised, because we have a wonderful community that's very engaged and cares about what's happening. that was really, really wonderful to see that turnout. But yeah, I think I love the setup of group tables and being able to listen to and meet people that way. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Councilmember Pham?
Yes, we could link that report that the city manager did do during the meeting to the calendar so that it's, you know, something that everybody could access.
All right, Councilmember Marshall.
I'm glad that we live in a community that has a city that's embraced diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that Kenmore stands for tolerance. Thank you.
Councilmember Kumar.
I have a couple updates. The Seashore Transportation Forum, they're starting to work on their legislative priorities, as was discussed in our joint meeting today. So I've already forwarded that to staff for input, but you all could bring up ideas also, I think, during one-on-ones. And also they mentioned that the Department of Commerce is currently taking comments for the transportation electrification strategy. This is for all of Washington state. So how are they going to reduce emissions, and also a big focus on like equity and environmental justice, like access to chargers, access to EVs for low income, especially for, you know, people who can't afford higher prices, and also encouraging resales. I do have kind of a question sort of for council, but I think also for our lawyer, which is that, like, are we required to post tonight's meeting as is, or can we edit it out, like the irrelevant public comments?
So how about, because of the late hours, that you and I touch base offline, and then I can provide a summary to the staff. On how
Okay,
to do
great. And I am hoping that maybe we might be able to, I mean, staff will probably, you know, have other suggestions, but I just want to float the idea that maybe we consider having prior signups to prevent a similar situation to what happened today during public comments.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Nothing meeting wise to ask. I just want to appreciate our staff and my colleagues on the council tonight. This was at times kind of a rough meeting, and just want to appreciate everybody, and once again congratulate everybody on Walkways and Waterways. It's huge.
Councilmember File.
Yes, you know, quite a meeting tonight, very lengthy. I appreciate everybody for the time and sticking with us tonight. And also, you know, it's an Indigenous Peoples' Day, and I couldn't be more proud of the work our municipality is doing with the Indigenous community and the arts, for example, and what we're doing for our nature and the environment. But I also want to touch on things that were said tonight and their impact both on our community and staff and some council members. Hate speech is not welcome in Kenmore. I'm really proud of how this council responded and the leadership of our council and your response in conducting the meeting. I apologize to our community who had to hear that and was shaken by that. It's been a painful time these last few days for many folks in our community, and I stand together with them. Anti-Semitism, hate speech, and othering of community is not what Kenmore is about, and we are better than that as a whole. On another note, the Hazways Committee, we adopted a position supporting the Railway Safety Act, which also connects with many municipalities and their commitment to the environment and climate action. And that's going to come back to the SCA, Sound Cities Association pick at some point. Also, there's going to be a meeting this week, and in consideration of the King County Crisis Care Centers levy. There's going to be also a pre-meeting in preparation for that discussion, and a vote later. And I am assuming that either our municipality or council members would have interest in a position on that. Usually it's Councilmember Baker who has the primary vote. They are calling both alternates and primary seats at the PIC meeting this next week. So before we go, and it's unusually out of order to do it rather last minute, but I'm assuming we want a position as a council prior to that vote.
A position on what exactly? What is the question? I'm sorry.
Whether or not we are supporting the King County Crisis Care Levy.
Are you talking about the implementation because the levy's passed?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's more, there's a workshop and it's continuation. And specifically on elements of the Crisis Care Centers levy and an additional vote that's going to be occurring.
So not a public vote, not a ballot.
Thank you.
No,
Ballot's already
exactly,
passed. Okay, just
exactly.
clarifying to keep.
Not an
so our city
additional-
attorney can stand down.
Exactly, exactly. No, it's a, yes, no, it's a further discussion.
I frankly, A, late hour, B, I don't think any of us have had time to review what you're asking for us to have a position on. So I don't think that we could have a fruitful discussion about that right now, unless anybody else wants to start a conversation about that right now, but I don't.
So would you authorize the appointed members to vote their conscience?
I mean, I don't think we've ever had to give direction to our pick representatives before on things. I can't think of, I don't think we've ever given direction to our pick representatives.
It's usually the proper forum that municipal leaders have that direction prior to the meeting. So I just wanted to point that out, not to be difficult, but.
No, I'm not accusing you of that. I would say, I would encourage you to maybe chat with the city manager about the issue a little bit more between now and Friday. Is it Friday? Nick?
At least that's been my experience these last 4 years.
Okay, but okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just don't think we've ever actually given direction though as a council on those there, but.
Your
Mr. City
Honor.
Manager, yeah.
Yeah, I think the deputy city manager has something to say.
Thank you.
Okay, so the deputy manager, city manager said she would follow up with council member File.
We'll just ensure that it's in line with stated city positions, I think. Deputy Mayor.
I have a couple of things. To each of the council members who have made a comment about the hate speech earlier in the meeting, thank you. It was a trying meeting in that regard. I just want to move over to being in the last 35 minutes of Indigenous Peoples Day, something that's been on my mind, and I would like to just plant a seed for, I'm not asking for any action, just share two things that I've been very much considering for several months. I'm sure thankful that we have a land acknowledgement. It was wonderful to have one of our guests and for comment on our land acknowledgement and the importance of it to her. One thing that I think that our city could do and really take leadership on is to put our land acknowledgement into a higher level of action by investigating or considering creating if it's welcome, a tribal advisory position for the work that we're doing here as a city. And the other part that has really crossed my mind, and these are just ideas, but we did once have a longhouse here, and if we ever have the land or possibility to donate land towards a longhouse with the tribes, I think it would be a beautiful thing for our community to do. In the idea or concept of a advisory position, I think with the work for our planet, with the stories and messages that we had from Thai Juvenile and over the course of summer, and the story during the story poll unveiling, I think one of the and events that I've been to, there are lessons and messages that we can learn by working more closely and intentionally with the tribes that I think serve us, our community, our world in a higher place, in a very positive, important way towards building community and doing the right things for our planet that we need to do. I also just wanted to call attention to gift cards for guns, October 21st at Shoreline Community College. I think it's one of the most important things that we as a council have taken a lead on. We are partnering with Shoreline and King County. I'm genuinely thankful to know that within a year of us really driving for this, that this is actually coming to fruition. It's late, so I'm going to end here. Thank you.
And I don't want to drag things out too much, but I do want to acknowledge the I want to acknowledge the pain that was caused during public hearing, and I appreciate staff and council colleagues with dealing with that situation. I think we all know that that sort of speech is hateful, unnecessary, and has no place in a city council meeting. And I think it's really unfortunate that that happened at our meeting. So, and I have not quite put my thoughts together on everything yet, because I'm still letting everything sink in, because it caught me completely off guard, because that is not how we work in Kenmore. So I'll be attending, changing topics, I'll be attending the AWC Mayor's Exchange on Friday in Leavenworth. And that's all I have right now. So nothing more to come before us. City Council, Kenmore City Council's adjourned.